Welcome back to another Orange Card, Blue Card podcast. I'm your host, Sam Tate, aka Ace Maneuvers. I am joined by the wonderful and recent regional license exam winner, Kevin Broberg, the Canadian Destroyer himself. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
It's great to be here.
So Kevin, you have a history of doing well in Canadian events. Do you think it is the proximity that you live? Are you just more familiar with Canadian cuisine? Do you think maybe do you think the drive over there is just a little more pleasant instead of flying out? What's giving you the edge in Canadian events?
I chalk up a lot to luck. I'm humble like that. I think, I've been doing pretty well lately. I have a very good deck, and I got to come out on the right side of all the variants this time. I think that was kind of true of the Can-Nats win forever ago as well. That I had a deck with a bunch of wild cards they decided to print, and got to he got some clever plays and get some wins. That's how I got there.
Awesome. You're speaking about variants, and I know that's just a little tongue-in-cheek for a Momo player. The ultimate toolbox.
Totally.
The ultimate
toolbox. I still have to make checks. I can't defeat control checks.
Hey, I can speak to that. My experience playing Momo, both like Solitaire Fishbowl and in the provisional itself, was to plan to check a 3, not even a 4. I actually took attacks out of my deck compared to Chris Bromley's. I was net decking Chris Bromley's list, and I'd modified it, and I took it down from 71 to, I think, 68 cards, and took out 1 attack and 2 foundations, basically, right? And, at 18 out of 68, I was just like, man, I'm going to check at least 2 3s every time I try to play 4 attacks. It was very strange. Luckily, the build that I had and the ability to, weave capture nets and things like that helps a lot, of course. But, yeah, that was just something very weird to me, that a deck that was so bloated, so non-attack heavy was still just the amount of cards you play, right? The amount of checks you make, you're bound to run into them. So tell me about that. Tell me about your variance throughout the event. Did you find yourself having to overbuild and compensate for these really heavy investment attacks like Cannon Blast, or were people kind of leaving themselves open for that sneaky home run comment?
So I definitely never got to sneak a home run comment. I think everyone kind of knew that was happening at the end of the strings, and I had to step them out and wear them out and play. I think really what I really liked the deck was just the ability to just throw 6 damage attacks, 6 speed attacks at people, and then put them to the test. I really love that kind of gameplay, and then home run comments in there to say if you ever slip up on that, or especially if we go into a really long game and you're letting me hit you with those, you go 10 life. I can tutor up multiple home run comments and present multiple lethal threats. And I think compared to Bromley's deck, compared to a lot of the other Momo decks, I try to play it a little more aggressively in a weird way. I focus on I have a bunch of damage pump foundations in my deck to just be able to count to high enough numbers to really threaten my opponents at whatever stage of the game. And I'm trying to page in of any particularly, especially high variance moments. I know I played against Ryan Field, returning regional champion with a somewhat nerfed deck, but still a very dangerous Suyotomi deck. And he definitely hit me with a 10 hit string and killed the crap out of me in one game. He got some really good builds out, and I just had to kind of fade the super hot draws in, I think, the other 2 games, if memory serves, where he got to attack me 5 times, but not 8 times.
The big thing, the big takeaway with the Asui deck now is just that she kind of has to make those checks organically a little bit. You don't get to kind of grease through every single attack checking a 3 now. The amphibious being gone is essentially 3 foundations missing. And then Frog Lashing also giving you back 2. Tell me, was there any time that you were looking through your discard pile and just didn't have what you needed? Was it ever an issue with your discard pile not being filled up? Because Momo doesn't have any self-mill activators, and now people will talk about we mill every time we make a control check, right? So the deck is still pretty consistent at filling it up. We talked about just the amount of cards that you get to play. But without anything like Revel at his Masterpiece or Frigid Heatwave type of stuff, how long, or I guess like the original question, was there ever a time where you were going through your discard pile and just went, man, I do not have what I need?
I don't recall one that stands out. I think I probably had a moment against Field where I wanted to tutor for a Rising Star that I couldn't. Because turn 2, you often just don't have it yet. I know, and I took some wild pains in my deck building that I was playing 3 of a lot of my critical cards. I was playing 3 Floating with My Babies that I don't think anyone is doing yet. I was playing 3 of each Cannon Blast and Home Run Comet, both to be able to search for one somewhat reliably and also be able to search for a second one in the longer game somewhat reliably. And yeah, I think, and also just, in a deck that would be shaped like Homer, like when I was playing Life Ochako and he wanted to search for 0 diffs with Haymaker, that was often a lot more of a struggle. I'd be doing that turn 3. But I don't know if I had any games that didn't go until turn 4 or 5 before I was really trying to start tutoring.
Okay. Yeah, it one of the things that I had to learn from the deck profile video is just how kind of loose and advantageous you can be with the tutor, right? A lot of times, I personally am a responsive player. I don't ever want to use my once per turn until I know you can't attack me anymore, or I'm using it to bring up the block that I need, right? And the idea that I'm going to pick up this Cannon Blast in front of you while you still have ready foundations, while, you still have access to attack me and show you ahead of time, those kind of plays sort of blow my mind. They're really the kind of thing where I expect to be punished for that, because as soon as I see a Momo player do that to me, it is my mission to make them block with it, right? It is now like you need to fish that attack back out of their hand.
Block that crappy +2 mid, yeah.
Right.
Ideally make a partial block for the absolute, yeah.
Yeah. And that's been really the only success I've had against the deck, is make her absolutely use every single card in her hand, make her chew up her board, and it doesn't look like a winning play. It doesn't look like a winning strategy until you send it back to the Momo player. They only happen to draw 1 or 2 attacks. They can't put together, a legitimate kill string, and so your bare bones leftover defense does just enough. And to me, that's a really cool exchange. I like that sort of blend where the aggressive deck, the deck on the beatdown, if you will, gets to say, okay, I don't have to play super great defense, but it has to exist, and being rewarded in sort of an unconventional way for attacking, via, I guess people would call it tempo, but it's really not when your opponent's about to draw 6 new cards. But is that like a style of play that you encountered, or what was really giving you trouble? What were your hardest matchups, I guess you could say, at the Canadian license exam?
I think probably. So, the 2 hardest matchups, like I said, I think 2 decks that took games off me in Swiss were Life Froppy, again with kind of that, multiple passing the torches, 10-card staging area, excited for blood going off, draw its deck, throw it all at me. That's a really challenging matchup, I think, both ways. She can defend adequately. She can't defend great. But if you throw whatever loosey-goosey stuff out there, it won't get through. But she can decide to block somewhere. She can decide to just take it. And I think actually Fields wound up in one game. I didn't have to attack him that much because he hit the basket full of babies button like 16 times, and he just decked himself. When he got a cycle, and it was already over. And then the other one was Kirishima, and I playtested with our friend Jeffrey Giggles on Friday afternoon, and he decided that he was going to go to Deadlock, which I think was a good play. And he went to 30 foundations, and I was not quite able to find the line to just sit back and play defense and try to deck him. I wasn't comfortable actually necessarily doing that just because he had a giant stage, but he had found. Anyway, I guess that's getting started into that. We played a 2-hour game that I lost by going all in on an attack string that had no chance of killing him. And then he got to easy backswing me by drawing 6 attacks off top of his deck. But in the tournament, he beat me in the first game with a nasty triple Hardened Frenzy string on turn 2 into multiple backhand haymakers on turn 3 into my stage was estimated, my life total was low, and he finished me off a few turns later. And that took about 20 minutes, and then I took about 20 minutes to just relentlessly beat the crap out of him and finish him with a. I don't even remember how I don't recall what I finished him with, but I just beat the brakes off of him for 20 minutes, and then I looked over the clock, and there's 20 minutes left in the round, and we tried our best to try to finish it off and get a decisive result. But that was his second draw with Momo that day. After he played in, I think, the very first round of the tournament and played a 0-0 draw against Brandon Smith. And those were definitely the two most stressful matches I played. Two very stressful matches I played in the tournament. I guess actually, the other really cool thing that happened was I played against Earth Bakugo in the quarterfinals, and he took a game off of me by just applying a bunch of pressure to my life total. Maybe this was a time where I didn't necessarily have everything I wanted, so I had to partial block a what's the big attack? Howitzer Impact Cyclone?
Impact Cyclone, yep.
And he was always shipping those at least, he was pressing the Bakugo button for speed, throwing momentum at it. He got great builds all over the place. And I remember I decided to commit a Floater on My Babies to pass control check that was face up rather than keeping it ready to be able to absorb his Bakugo response. And then I had to flip a high value target rather than my babies to that response, and I failed my check to block by 1. And so he killed me off of actually a freaking final exam gut shot. I had 2 blocks in my pool. I had to block with a cannon blast. It was on a 7. I had 2 up plus a. I basically just had my double high value targets up, but one of them was face down, so I checked a 4. No, actually, maybe I just had high value target up because I know I checked a 4 and failed.
Yeah.
Off by 1.
That's some rough stuff, but that's kind of the beauty of our game, right? Is a deck that people kind of write off might have secretly a really good game into certain decks, and it really comes down to if you can hit your highs while your opponent's hitting their lows a lot of the time. Because of the level of variance that we have, I don't think any deck is truly unbeatable, and saying that a deck has to have its actual worst outing possible isn't a fair critique of it. But with 70 plus cards in a deck, especially if you're not going first and you don't get to dig through nearly 20 of them, the likelihood of seeing things like Rescue completed with Study Group Leader, they're not that consistent, at least not in my experience, right? And I want to ask you, we asked if you found those cards in your discard pile as often as you'd like. Your opening hands, tell me about the opening hands. Were there any that really stuck out? Did you have a consistently sort of medium opening hand? Because very few of them looked unplayable. There's certainly plenty of foundations and good checks in there, but getting the right combination of defense, speak to me on that. What are you looking for in your opening hands?
Certainly the first thing I look for is just the card A Precious Lesson. That's the best card I want to have on turn 1 if I ever can. Just because it puts more resources in my stage. I'll blow something up sooner or later. It'll be 2 cards, and that's the best thing. I'm very partial to New Training Method. If I can find that, I basically treat that as a 0 difficulty card because I play it as a 2, but then it builds any other card. So if that last card gets to be the 0 diff that comes out for free. and then then I can use the training methods on turn 2 and later to make those combos. If I frequently would check a rescue completed on my second or third card and say, well, we're picking that up and we're playing on a 6 here. It's because it's worth it, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, just trying to get, if I can, if I'm going first against a deck that I think has ready, set, go, I'll prioritize having an asset or having a ready,
new training.
The card I just said, new training method, yeah. So that they can't. That actually came up in my second game against Bakugo, where he had it, but I said, no, this is an asset that you don't get to respond. And just trying to get a good build, and then the combo. I don't have to have the combo assembled on turn 2 every game. But if I have it assembled by turn 2 or 3 or 4, then that can really help lock the game up. Combos like Rescue Completed plus Study Repleter.
Yeah, that's like the defensive core of the deck really is the free -2 from Rescue Completed once a turn, and then being able to rely on cards like Release and Momo to send that blocking potential through the roof, really. Are you afraid of the hand tax decks coming out soon? I think we're seeing a lot more discard with Villainous Waylay. We're seeing now the Midnight Ultra Rare that makes you discard a card. We've seen 13's attack that makes you discard a card, but you do get to draw one if you end up with 2 or fewer cards. What would be a really good strategy against Momo? Because for me, if I'm picking one, it's just making you discard the cards back out of your hand.
I mean, I think, I've lost a Jiro bunch with this deck. I guess it's something like a coin flipping matchup because I play a lot of 1, 2, and 1, 1 and 2 kind of sets.
Real quick, sorry, you cut out just a little bit right when you said the character's name. Can you just repeat that for me?
Kyokujiro, the earphone jack girl.
Okay.
And so, what she gets to do, I think, the first and most important thing in any game where you're trying to kill your opponent is to have attacks that count up to their life total. And when I think of discard decks, I think of that being a relative weak point for them. It's just that, I draw my triple Villainous Waylay, haha, you're never going to block these. I'll take 15 and go to 11. What else you got, right? Now you have to pass control checks for your actual finisher with 3 progressive, and there's a lot of ways this could go wrong. And so what Jiro gets to do is she gets to both have a huge damage output and make Momo work really hard, make a lot of soft reads on what zone she's going to hold and how she's going to block, but also do that further and further over the course of the turn and try to judge how long is this attack string going to be. So you play an attack with 4 cards already in your card pool, that's going to be much more important to block than the that random little lead-off poke. And also she had great ways to spend momentum, so now those lead-off pokes mattered so much more. And actually I think momentum is a really maybe not underutilized resource right now, but the ability to spend it well is something I value very highly, right? There's a lot of powerful tools floating around that's not really great use of momentum. But I love that home run count lets me spend momentum for 5 damage. That's amazing. I love Cool Student. If you get to play that card, is really sweet. Just for really if you have 2 or 3 momentum, that stretches out your attack strength so much. But yeah, and I think, and then the other thing that Jiro does is she puts speed on stuff, and so it can. If I need to blow up my stage to reduce your speed to stop your big attack string, then playing against Momo when you're down on foundations is very, very hard to get through. It's very hard. I rarely am killed from full. I don't know if I've ever been killed from full with this deck, actually, just because your ability to through your opponent's attack string is so strong.
Yeah.
But if you're down on those foundations, then you can get back into a corner very badly. And especially, you can be in a no-win scenario where you're on 4 foundations, they're at full life. You have to try to build out, but also hold the blocks, and also you're never getting their life total down. And those are the most painful games to lose, because not only are you hopeless, you're behind, but it also feels really hopeless.
Yeah, I think that's what gets to most people. That's what hurt me early in my testing against Momo, is you look at the board and it's a new level of defense, right? It's a new level of speed hate. It's a new level of being able to tutor up a block in set 2, to match up. One of the most frustrating plays I would run into is grabbing Net Gun Surprise. You know, just knowing that my first one gets blocked, any mid attack gets blocked, and knowing the second one is absolutely free. You know, there's no way I'm going to really affect my opponent's board just by them making control checks. I think a decent amount of games are won just off of the variance while blocking. You know, you're going to block on a 5 and check a 3, and losing those two foundations, getting that effective stun 2, if you will. You know, that's the kind of thing that people take for granted a lot, you know. People assume that when they're planning out things, and this is fine as far as like theory crafting a really good offense, don't get me wrong, but they always talk as if the opponent will always check a 5 and the opponent will always have everything ready and everything's going to be face up and they're never going to actually use that encouraging training partner, will always be face up there, you know, like I think people are discrediting multiple turn attacks, right? They're discrediting presenting a threat and going through an answer and not immediately losing because of it. Can you speak a little bit on that, where when it comes to theory crafting, are you looking for, I guess, like the best scenario possible for the opponent? Can I overcome that? Is it something that you generally worry about, or are you just focused on your deck doing its thing as best as it can?
Yeah, I think I trend towards the latter. I think I try to, I've been playing a whole lot of Deck of the Haymaker this season because I just think that's the best card, and I'm trying to make it
pretty sick.
Yeah, I'm kind of just think of it as, well, let me make the best card the best that it can be, and then hopefully it can carry me through. I don't necessarily put that much stuff. I think, yeah, as you say, there's so much that can happen. There's so many, there's so many variables on top of variables when we talk about like what's the best defensive board that could possibly come out of this. What would that happen? How would that look like? But so like I know I've talked to a couple people about, at Gen Con we were talking about, well, if someone's going to play a Momo Mirror, how's that going to go? Well, like, who's going to have the better deadlock answers, because it's just such a miserable wall matchup. And it turns out it's actually kind of a bloody gore fest, weirdly. Of both of us throwing our sage at each other to cancel out speed pumps and trying to pass blocks and playing all these kind of just incremental value attacks that try to add up to a snowball that just puts you into a position where you can actually land something serious. Mm-hmm. And there's so much, despite Momo reducing the variance in all these ways, there's still so much variance in what if you can draw a handful of attacks, if you can draw the right foundations to build a resource snowball. It's just so unpredictable, and so I kind of just build from the ground up and say, well, let me build this as best I can. Let me find every advantage that I can and try to just give myself a chance to find the best lines over the board.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that a lot of what I see stemming from Set 2 is not just the Haymaker, which is, as Andrew Holner and I have coined on commentary, an innocuous attack, right? It's something you're going to play simply because it draws a card, but it's also going to stun them down from foundations, and if absolutely needed, it can build in a +1 repeatable damage source. So for a deck that can easily pass 4 or 5 attacks, that one little 0 diff can now become an entire Haymaker's worth of damage, right? So it's one of those things where when you can tutor up things like Cannon Blast on the spot, and you can pay for it for free essentially with Study Group Leader, and that eventually one of you is going to have more Cannon Blasts than the other, I think it kind of behooves you to push those answers. And like we were talking, like I was talking about just a second ago, your opponent's only going to have so many encouraging training partners, right? They're only going to have so many speed resets. And so if your defense is good enough to survive their one Cannon Blast or their turn 2, everything they can afford, if you saw your Study Group Leaders first, I think that control matchups actually end up a lot more decisive in most games than an aggro mirror would, right? Than 2 aggro decks, if only because typically in an aggro mirror, that you're going to eat that backswing, and so you get very nervous and anxious, and you're like, okay, how can I make my line as tight as possible? Whereas when you have the freedom to survive another turn or two and you know that you're probably only landing 5 or 6 damage here, you get the freedom to explore what your opponent has in their hand. And you get the freedom to find out what they're willing to give you from their hand. And so, we saw in the Jiro versus Asui matchup at, I believe it was Gen Con, right, that took way longer than the Momo mirror, Tell me about the Kirishima Momo matchup. How long does that usually take? Does that look similar to the Momo? You said you guys played a 2-hour game, but you've also had more experience with other Kirishima 2s at this point.
Yeah, so I think the critical thing is just that Kirishima doesn't expend any resources to do all the stuff he does. And that... I'm trying to think if that, sounds like I'm, saying he should be banned or something, or not. He attacks you, and if he checks 5s, he can play 6 diffs and keep the counter of his staging area ready. And as the game drags on, if he wants to go to deadlock, he can just build 4 foundations. He can attack 3 times and then build 3 foundations and kind of not care. And a lot comes down to sort of his psychology. A lot comes down really to kind of his psychology, how he wants to approach blocking, how he wants to approach deadlock. Because Kirishima, and also kind of what he can draw off the top of his deck, what he's holding in his hand versus trying to rip off the top with Kirishima's Enhance, how he's holding cards. Because if, as you say, in terms of Kirishima's best possible scenario on defense, he has, you're so obvious, a speed reset, speed or damage reset. But then after that, he really doesn't have that many good defensive cards. He just has face down foundations to pass control checks. He can have high value target to be count for 2. And he says good block modifiers. But if you play 5 and 6 speed attacks and he blocks with a +1 and checks a 5 and then stacks foundation to build another foundation and then checks a 5 on his dex block and then checks a 5 on his dex block, that's actually incredibly hard to get through. Especially when any large attack will be, your biggest attack will get its damage halved. So you often have to overkill him. If you're trying to OTK him, you have to overkill him by a pod. I know in my match in the finals, one thing that just stuck out to me was that I played a Haymaker and then enhanced with, I forget if I checked a 5 or, so I enhanced with Momo blowing up a weapon foundation and then used Quick Creation to put it back into the card pool, and then just sent it as a 6 mid for 7. And my opponent said, "That's scary. I'm going to take it." And I had no more attacks by hand. But that put him to 20, and then my final attack string actually killed him from 20. Off the back of, it was like a 0 grab lift into a instant Shining Flash into a Cannon Blast. And he had attacked me a bunch the previous turn, so he was committed medium low. Blocking that Shining Flash made him almost unable to block anything else. So the Cannon Blast was for 14, that got halved, so he went to 10. And then I played a Bow Staff and used it to tutor for a Quick Creation, built that down, and that was 10 damage off of triple Quick Create.
This man
so because of that,
to grab Quick Create.
I think Bow Staff is fantastic. I think growing on me every minute I play this deck. Because, and this is kind of I feel like I build wall decks and then turn them back into aggro decks. That's kind of my thing with Hiroshima, and it's feeling like a pattern now. Of finding, so what Bow Staff is to me is it's a 4 difficulty attack that's really a 3 difficulty attack that actually puts me up resources, even in the turn that I'm in. Because I can use Rising Starlet to build the card I put into the card pool. And that's really just making the most of Rising Starlet was almost the reason that it's there.
And see, that's actually been a lot of my philosophy when it comes to deck building. Excuse me. Over the years, I love to have my offense is itself. It's all the attacks, right? My offense is just all my attacks working together, usually with my character, and that's sorted. It's fine. The rest of my deck, I want to be all interaction, all defensive, maybe a spam here or there for damage pump, right? Historically, all the best offensive foundations that aren't an offensive cancel, right? Offensive control, have been repeatable +1 damage sources, all the way back from Flawed Energy Core, now all the way to Stronger in Darkness and Floating Around My Babies. So, like, I used to love making a Shield Ram deck that has 50 pieces of defense and 4 Flawed Energy Core, and then the Shield Ram deck just goes, right? Like, when it came to, the Dimitri decks, where literally everything is defense, and then the throws just do the work for them. Seeing these Momo decks, though, it's very much not the case. It's very much not a on-rails sort of offense where you can always just go charge that draws, stun attack, home run comet, right? Like
Yeah.
Did you find a common line throughout the tournament that sort of disproves what I just said, or was it always something different?
I think there was a lot of improvisation and a lot of, I built my deck. I really like the Electro Stomp Boots. I think that's something that not a lot of the other Momo players, and also Zero Gravity Lift, are not as high on. And I think those because both their combo with each other, kind of. If you have a stomp, if you have a Zero Gravity Momentum, you can lift up your stomp and then pick it back up, and it's a lot of fun.
With Study Group Leader, that's what hit me when I saw the stomp. I went, of course, you can pay for it for free.
And untapping Quick Creation it's hard to manage, and I think that's really one of the big things. Just like having Quick Creation put in weapon cards before you use Momo's Enhance. Either like you can use Release to set it up, you can use. It's really like just Release, and then it's Release, and you can use Floating My Baby to actually remove the top 3 cards to dig into a weapon as your 4th or 7th card down or whatever. And kind of finding those lines is very kind of just on the spot. Like, let me calculate a bunch of stuff and figure out what I can make happen this turn. Definitely, if my opponents were tapping out, then I would just tutor for a home run comet and kill them. But most of my opponents wouldn't do that. They would make me find something. I think the most common, the one sort of common like bread and butter I would go for was just finding a Cannon Blast and using that just into their open board. Just saying, here's a 9-speed high attack for more damage than any of my other attacks. Take it. And then they would block and they would tap out a bunch, and then say, okay, now I have my other random 4 diff attacks that I can use I can figure out how to juggle my staging area to make this the most guaranteed string I can.
Yeah, and that's something I wish I had done in retrospect, was instead of trying to use Cannon Blast on people who are opened up, to use it to open them up, to say, look, you don't have this reset. All your foundations are ready. If you want to start releasing, that's strategically, technically a better play sometimes to just release 2 ready foundations rather than to tap 4 of them. It's a super hard call to make, though, especially if you check poorly anyway, right? But so that was something that I wish I had thought of more often. I was very concerned with stunning first. I want to see what my opponent stuns, right? I want to see what they're willing to give up when they have a full board. And another card that was a thorn in my side that I don't know if you saw a ton of was Forcing Surrender. Do you have plans for playing around Forcing Surrender? Is there really a sort of answer to that? Does it give you pause when you see it? Was it something that was relevant at the Canadian Regional?
It did show up. I don't know if any of my Hiroshima opponents had it or used it, to my recollection. I think Jeff might have. But so kicking out, one thing we haven't mentioned is just how strong and how important to her game plan is Momo's ability to clear her blocks. Mm-hmm. So if you block with a weapon and you get to build it in your stage, it is such a huge advantage compared to blocking with any other card, because you not only take away 1 progressive difficulty, you also don't pay a resource to use Momo's Enhance. So, if I block with 2 Excited for Bloods, I block on your speed +2 and then your speed +3 with progressive, and I want to use Momo to make that easier. I have to start throwing my stage away. But if I block with double Rising Starlet, now the first one is speed +2, and then on the second one, now I can -2 your speed, clear my card pool, build a ready foundation, and next turn I'm still at the same foundation count I was when I started. So it's a huge upgrade. And Forcing Surrender interferes with that. You can use Forcing Surrender to kick out one of Momo's blocks if it was a weapon is a good play. It is, it plays into the long game plan of trying to deny my staging area in kind of a weird oblique way.
It goes back to. Sorry to cut you off. It goes back to it's not the play that looks good. It's not a play that you're used to making, but and it's not a play for this turn. It's a play for future turns.
Yeah, and I think I remember with Kirishima, and I mentioned Kirishima, the old Kirishima 1 matchup was that because all the cards are named Harden, and there's this dumb meme of if you hard, you hard from some stupid work poster. But how does people ask how does the Kirishima matchup go? And the answer is, well, if you're hard, you're hard. You gotta stay hard, and you just gotta block the right stuff, and you got to keep your life total really high and just grind and relentlessly and just find every little edge you can in this game that's going to go for 8 turns of just nonstop punching each other with attacks that are easy to block. And if you especially Momo versus Kirishima is very much Kirishima 2 now is very much like that of just throwing attacks, knowing they're going to get blocked, knowing they're easy to defend against on both sides, and trying to find those edges in those long games to grind it out. But yeah, the thing I was going to say was just regarding forcing surrender is that I don't play Create Capture Net, and that's the card that gets clowned the worst by forcing surrender. Kicking out my weapons is uncomfortable. I'm pretty sure I use quick create and put in a floating on my babies. My opponent was like, no, we are forcing surrender on that one. And I was like, well, that's sad, but okay, whatever. I got 2 damage out of it still.
And you have to go through it eventually, right? You don't have any way to interact with your opponent's board. This deck has essentially some stun, and because you're not playing the capture net, it doesn't have the full overload of stun package, so you're pretty much subject
we got first speed low stun ones. That's a real ass card.
True.
But it's a very this kind of deck really makes you appreciate how good Apathetic is. How good it is to be able to take your opponent's cards off the table, and instead of having to just play through every single thing, to just say, I'm going to be like a beautiful flower and just bloom all over this battlefield until I can overcome. You just have to play through everything. You just have to put stuff on the table until you can get there, and just block a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely not a canned matchup at all. It's not something you can just walk into and say, counter this card, block this one attack, then backswing. It's not really something that works like that. And I think maybe people were spoiled a little in set 1 just because the card pool was so small, and you can kind of telegraph what are the best attacks on a symbol. So when there's only 1 or 2 attacks that can possibly kill you, right? Or all the attacks that are lethal are all the same zone. I think people got a little comfortable with predicting certain lines and being like, oh, well, I lost to this combination. Of course I did. It's all the best statted stuff, right? And now we're seeing a little bit more of that creativity, a little more of that, second guessing. I myself started taking 1.3 million out of my Denki deck because it was simply there as a way to force you to hold lows when I know I'm never going to hit you with this low. I know you're going to wait for it forever, and things like that. As more cards hit the card pool, do you think we're going to see sort of that same rhetoric of, oh, we'll just touch up on these really important attacks, or how are we going to speak about defense, I guess, in the future going forward? How are we going to, or do you think we'll just see sort of these homogenized lists of clearly the best attacks, even though we still don't really have that?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. It's hard to say without what all the card pool is going to be. I think, consider the Earth Kirishima decks. I think they're pretty homogenized. You play basically 12 attacks that say hardened on them, and then you kind of season to taste if you want to play Naval Laser Beam, or if you want to play, I'm blanking on how many Texas Smash do you want to play? You play 4 Haymakers every time. Do you want to play some Berserker Blows Bane, or do you want to leave those on the sideboard? But you're kind of, I think, pretty forced into the punch package, and then you're playing Kirishima because he's really solid, he's really good, and then that kind of, I don't know. I feel like this is going in a different direction than the first question. I think in the future, it depends on what we'll see. And I think one one thing that I think is missing from the metagame that would feel like sort of natural predator to Momo is a deck that really makes a big snowball. And I know Jazz Games is kind of tentative with big snowballs because if Momo had or if Staff Strike were a really reliable way to put 400 damage on the table once the game got long enough. yeah, exactly.
Like the Wavering Slash, I guess.
Yeah. Then that would be you would get into that. Then the risk is that you get into a metagame where that's the only thing people are doing, and none of the game matters until you reach the point where someone just unleashes their snowball and wins the game very easily. There's not enough interaction in that or whatever. But that kind of deck is the strategy that can really test a deck like Momo that's saying, well, I'm going to nickel and dime you with Rescue completed, and you say, well, what you need to block is 400 speed. And it's like, that's impossible, so I will die.
Yeah, I think when we talk about, I guess, scaling characters, the one that always comes up, the one to me that looks impressive, that looks like a deck I would love to play, but I never get around to fine-tuning it. It never seems to be quite there, and I just don't know if anyone's just not spending the time or if I'm not keen to it, but it's Todoroki 1. Todoroki 1 can scale to a point where he can put massive damage on throws. Technically does have answers to Faith Shield, does have answers to Wall Cling. Is this a deck that you think could evolve to be well situated against a deck like Kirishima and Momo? Could it possibly be the third piece of this wall breaking? I guess Todoroki would probably still have to wall up to get to that point, right? Like he'd still have to survive with 20 life. But I was gonna segue into a Keenan Meadows based question, but a character like Todoroki, is that something that you think could have that snowball effect where, if you let him get to +5, +6 damage, and he's just sending pokes at you saying, all right, Face Shield removes from the game, we're going to seal these wall cleans?
Yeah, no, I think Todoroki's a good example of a character, they can scale up as the game goes along and really put you to the test and say you have to full block. I guess he just quite big enough to say full block everything. You're not playing 25 damage attacks, but you're certainly playing 10, 15 damage attacks, and if any of those get through at any decent clip, then you'll win that game. Or if you can play throws and chip them for 7 damage a turn. I poo-poo throws a lot because I think people overrate throws. Like you say, wow, a 10 damage throw, no, it's not. 10 damage that's only 5. It takes more than 5 of those to kill me. We can play this all day. You cannot pass enough blows in time to kill me. I will just kill you back. But I think that's certainly a character, and I want to say that the night before we went up, I played a game into Sean O'Brien playing Cementos, and he ragdolled me, dude. It was rough. The first weekend I showed up with Momo, my second match was against a local player, Brandon, who actually is like my good luck charm. Was if he beats the crap out of me before a tournament. I remember he played Bakugo 1 into my Kirishima 1 right before we went to Omaha for that first tournament. Or no, right before the provisional that I ultimately won, the online provisional. And before Gen Con, he bodied me with Ojiro, of all things.
All right.
And, that I went on a great run. But Cementos beats the crap out of me because he gets to have 1 million cards. He can defend himself well enough, kind of in the vein of Kirishima. He casually builds deadlock and then says, draw enough to kill me, and I'll do my best to block it or whatever. But then I'll backswing you, and if I draw the handful of attacks, they will be all for 10 or 15 damage, and you will fall down.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I guess the real triangle if we're trying to break it down to 3 decks that people hate to play against right now. The ones people are complaining about is this wall meta that's come out of nowhere, and it's the Kirishima decks, the Momo decks, and now to fight the Momo and the Kirishima decks, the Cementos decks, the infinite scaling. I guess he sort of snowballs his hand size, if you want to think about it that way. He snowballs massive damage in the same vein as Todoroki 1, right? Only for free, only without the commit cost. So, that could be a deck to watch out for. A couple of Cementos did make top cuts in the last provisional. So that's definitely something to keep on the radar. Going forward, are you going to keep playing the Momo? Are you going to keep iterating on that? Are there any other decks that you feel like playing? And, what's next on the list for Kevin Broberg?
Yeah, so for Pasadena, I'm personally not planning to play Momo. I think I am in a good enough spot on the leaderboard. I can kind of branch out and see what else is going on in this format. I really want to play some Cheerful Uppercuts. Okay. That's a lovely card, and it seems like a good way to inflict suffering on people who think that Backheli Haymaker cannot be punished, which has certainly been me, and no one has done it to me yet, and I feel like that is a wrong that must be righted. And yeah, so I'm looking at a couple different approaches to that. Scott DeJohnette posted a cool Ochako 1 deck, and I only quit that deck in set 1 because it was so bad into Mineta, and no one's playing Mineta anymore. I can see myself playing Mineta. I can see myself playing Keenan Meadows, kind of Conway Woods style. I certainly played some Water 7-handers back in set 1 and had a great time. Yeah, I think I want to see if I can mix it up. I see if I can slug out see if I can find something that can at least 50-50 into Momo that isn't, because Scoreboard says that you cannot 50-50 into Momo right now, because most of the Momo players keep placing absurdly high with crazy win-loss records.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think Cement Toss might have his day in the sun pretty soon. I know, trends that happened. Tamron Cardwell played it, so a lot of his fans are probably going to be dusting off Cement Toss. We've had a couple diehard Cement Toss fans and people who were calling it out as, an issue before it was even out in the open. So it'll be interesting to see the evolution of the format. It'll be really interesting to see this weekend's results. Are you playing in the Provisional this weekend, the webcam event?
I am not. I haven't actually signed up for a Provisional and an online event since the online regional. I recently rearranged my desk a whole bunch and just haven't gotten the camera set up back for that.
Yeah, it's, webcam, it is what it is. It's got a little extra string attached to it. I myself am kind of waffling on playing it only because I still don't have a deck. It's 2 days away. I might try to talk to Aspira about trying to co-cast it. I know on day 2, Tam has done a lot of the side streaming and stuff like that, so might talk to them and try to get an unfun stuff, unsponsored or not unofficial, I guess, side stream going. Because I really don't know what to play. I was not, a personal fan of the Momo deck. It's not really my style. I like to have my board be... I like my board to be, oppressive and, intrusive, kind of. And the Momo deck is sort of this giant net where it's just gonna catch everything you send its way and just gently put it on the ground to the side and, not be hurt by it. Whereas I really want the effects like Night Watch. I want you to look at my board and say, oh, I don't get to do things, not I get to do things to no effect. So
you should play Death Eraser with Evil Gaze and Gale Force Punch and Cheerful Uppercut and Apathetic and Night Watch. And I think I had another one.
Hash these massive checks.
Yes. And an Ochako 2 in the sideboard to really just nut draw on people.
Man, every time I pick up Ochako 2, I end up making the air version, and I play the air version. I'm like, these aren't 6-speed base. I'm never hitting anybody.
I know, right? Cringe.
I love the card draw. I love the card draw that the air version gets, but you never hit anybody. And I guess now you have Excited for Blood for Death, so...
No, and you get latent skill on it, which is good. But on death, you get latent skill and naval laser beam to do it again.
All right, you might be selling me on the death symbol here.
It's really sweet, but the problem is that it has so many cards. I still can't bring myself to settle on a deck. I actually talked David Thomas into doing this, being David Penna, who is also an Ochako 2 enthusiast. We talked him into it on the drive up. He built it the morning of, or the night before, rather. We called it low Chaco because it was mostly low attacks, but it still had 3 Turn Dust, 3 Gale Force Punch, and he got 9th on breakers.
Damn,
it was such a heartbreaker.
Yeah, I think the Lomu idea, but just finding like other sources of damage and playing a different character is actually a super solid idea. Especially since, now that people like almost expect it from Nomu, if you start playing a character where they might not expect it, you actually get to steal that first game, right? I am excited to try out its Blast Rush Turbo Racerhead. It's actually been around for a while. But now that you can play Howitzer Impact Cyclone after it, I'm much more excited to try out Death Eraser. So that might be something in the future. Recently, I have been playing a lot of Eraserhead, but actually on the Void symbol, trying to play charge attacks instead of kicks. Where the game plan is... So, Extend is still a charge, and then you still play Recipro Burst as your dunk. But you try to get momentum from blocking with charge attacks and using Rock and Attitude. So I don't have to progress my game plan on my turn. And if you have 4 copies of Rock and Attitude and 4 copies of Manly Passionate Guy, you do a pretty good job of looking like Momo.
Yeah, a little bit.
You can effectively sit there with 4 cards in hand and go, okay, look, every single one of these that I block with are going to leave my card pool, and if they don't, I'm going to draw 2 cards probably. So
yeah, I think Manly Passion Guy is low-key an insanely well-positioned card right now because there's so many people just throwing out random crap attacks. Mm-hmm. Just like, hey, will this stick? Will this stick? Will this stick? And you're just like, yeah, I will build a learning the standards. Thank you.
Look, I will trade all the cards you're going to draw from this future charge for me to build this, +3 mid, essentially. So I've been a big fan of that sort of a game plan, but it's still the kind of deck that feels really bad when your opponent taps out against you and you just draw like Airstream Driver, Double Jab Pummel.
Oh, Double Jab Pummel is the pick. Okay, yeah.
And you're just like,
that makes sense.
Yeah. So you do get... So Thomas Redmond actually just posted this meme, but the one thing I really liked about the charge version is you actually have +1 mid block or +1 blocks in every zone. You have Double Jab for +1 high, you have Airstream for +1 low, and you get 0 Gravity Barrier for +1 mid. And you also get to cheat 0 Gravity Barrier into your momentum with Rock and Attitude. So there's all these really cool plays you can do. It's just actually assembling that offense is still just about as anemic. And now it's actually kind of worse because you can reliably hit people with high engine kick, and you can send out a 6-for-4 extend, and feel good about those. Mm-hmm. You don't really get to like start your offense with Airstream Driver. You don't really want to play your Gravity Barrier as an attack. You don't get to start with Double Jab Pummel, and then your other attacks are like extend and your finisher. So you're still kind of in like this very weird place. I haven't figured out how to play it yet. But it does actually solve the block mod problem, which I like, and it does not make me reliant on really telegraphed plays. But once people know you're on charges, they know all the void charges. So before we get too far away from Momo and Cementos, that seems like a good enough segue. We do have a viewer, a chatter, who's probably not here anymore at this point, but they wanted to ask you, what is the most degenerate deck you've ever played? Now, I personally know the answer to this. I know how I feel about this, but you might have had some sauce from before I started playing the game. You probably have a different opinion on this completely, but what is the most degenerate deck you have ever played?
Yeah, the truthful answer is probably DeForester Athena, as you pointed out. That's probably correct, because like Superior Technique is we were actually playing Superior Technique wrong. We thought it was a 5 diff instead of a 4 diff. When you it was a 14 foundation deck, and that was like a high number of foundations. It got to cheat so much, and it got to see so much of its deck and just go completely buck wild on people. And on top of that, it still got to play a bunch of interaction, right? I'm talking about Momo, you just have to play through all your fun stuff. But in Athena, you got to revoke their stuff. You got to perfect accuracy their stuff. You got to Sagaki offering a kick interaction out of their card pool sometimes. And you just got to just print so many resources so wildly. It really was playing a different game than UFS. Unlike any other deck I think I've ever really played. The one I was gonna say before that I really like processed that. I was gonna say what's the most deck I ever played was probably the other one was Slice Kicks, but I never played it like a degenerate deck. Kirk Foka taught me that you can just play Playful Slice on turn 1, going first.
Wait.
And you just spike the 4, and then you kill them. And I was like, that's not right. You can't do that. You can't. What if you check a 3? What if you check? He's like, nah, you just kill him. It's like,
wait, I might be thinking of a different card. I have to pull this up. Playful Slice.
So, Playful Slice was a 4 difficulty 2 control, 3 mid for 5 weapon attack with a combo ability that was really fancy if you wanted to play that kind of game. But it also said your attacks can minus 2 difficulty.
Yes. Okay.
So it was true identity on a stick. You played this attack, and it said, "Hey, yeah, this turn it's like you didn't play me," and also true identity.
Right.
And the whole deck was, as you were saying, like free plus damage effects. There was a character named Michael who said free plus 1 damage, and there was also a character named Turong who said free plus 2 damage with some other strings attached. And so, I played the Mike Lowe version of that deck, and I played a bunch of really fun card draw effects and a bunch of disruptive foundations and a bunch of other funny things. And you could play it as an even more degenerate deck that would probably beat up Athena pretty okay just by killing her on turn 1 going first. And that was, I never played the Tiger Scream deck that could do that. It was all buddy blocks and Tiger Scream you for 30. But I've never... I have killed people on 1, but I've never done it going first.
I was going to say, I do think the other turn 1 deck is really cool, only because it's like a really specific combo, which was the Ghostly Maneuvers Critical Split, where you have to like play an attack, then hard check the mid attack, and then Ulrich, and then Ghostly Maneuvers, and still check... Or I guess you could tap Ulrich at that point, but it
was guaranteed on 3s with the right draw.
Yeah, because I think it started with like Etten Cells or something, right? So that deck was really cool. Any deck that attacks on turn 1 though is pretty degenerate in general. There's like a baseline of degenerate.
Now officially outlawed in the so even if we put those cards back, you're gonna do it.
Yeah. I know a lot of people would say it was actually the Pillow Fort Psyche deck, which you got a lot of credit for, but I believe was the Devin Bernier special, correct?
No, so Devin actually hates that deck. He loved Psyche, and he actually played Psyche in our team's win when I played Asset Athena. But he was doing it before Pillow Fort was out. He was using an asset Hornbrook Bach that was a funky, symmetrical, playable, committed free +1 damage effect. That said, if your opponent blocked, you have to print momentum, and so that on top of Psyche got to pull as you could just take it onto your stage as soon as you were done with it. Add it to your momentum, and it was a really wild, truly a tempo deck. It was a deck that was destroying opponent foundations. It had this lovely card Shell Kick that said pay momentum to make your opponent lose a foundation, and you get to build the top part of your deck. It was playing
Shell Kick is cool, by the way.
Shell Kick is so cool. It's just I really loved a lot of that Morgan's cards. The kind of symmetrical. You lose 1, I gain 1. It got to play Power Split, and it played the precursor to I think Gigantic Explosion is the name of the Bakugo attack. You got to play the old version of that. He's talking about Shield Ram. You just misspoke. Fine, it's fine.
Shield Ram is fine. We love Shield Ram.
Yeah, we really love Shield Ram here. But he was playing an aggro deck. And the Pillow Fort deck was Cancer, and it pushed out the cool fun. I think rotation also hurt it. Also, that Psyche deck was playing one really fun card called Brash and Aggressive that has seen no play before or after. It said whenever you pay momentum during an enhanced step, you got to make a 4+ to get 1 speed, 1 damage. And so those Shell Kicks were all of a sudden 7 speed high for 9s just for debuilding your opponent 1. And it was a really sweet suicide aggro deck.
Man, I tried to play Brash and Aggressive. I think it was in Gutsman. I think I had like some sick Gutsman. Like I'm just trying to make as many checks as possible, sort of a deck. But yeah, it definitely not a card you saw too often. Brash and Aggressive would be really sweet in My Hero, just because there's so many characters that deal with getting momentum and like that's kind of their thing, but their payoffs are about the same as anyone else's productivity a lot of the time. Usually for a lot of the characters, the real benefit of getting momentum is that's coming from your card pool. You know, or
yeah, Broberg, yeah.
Yeah, or like if you're Mount Lady now, I want to tutor up face up gravity barriers, right? Stuff like that. So, so I think, but I do think that for anyone who doesn't know, the Pillow Fort Psyche deck would jam 2 face downs into your card pool and then bounce your attacks as you tried to play them back to your hand. And so you'd have to play them on bonus difficulty. And when they got bounced back to your hand, there was a card that would burn you for 2 life. And so you could actually just die to getting your attacks.
I forgot I did that to you.
What?
I forgot. Because they ratted that card out. It didn't work anymore after that, like after that event.
Yes.
But
after it dunked me in Swiss, thanks, yes.
And I think it might have come up later, but that was the only game where I locked someone out with Pull Damage again, plus Diplomatic. Yeah, so they made basically a card that was a hate card against Froppy, the Fox of the World. Said if your opponent makes a card leave their card pool, well, you can burn them for 2 life. But it said just to any effect during the combat phase. And so, well, they eradicated it saying any effect during the combat phase.
When it was originally printed, it was for any reason. And so people were like, oh, during your end step, you built 5, I'm just going to respond 5 times, check a 4 5 times, and burn you for 10. So they had to errata it. And it got changed to like due to any effect, and then it got changed to like due to your opponent's effect because of this deck, because this deck would just bounce your attacks, and when it leaves, or Skull Barrier would discard it straight from the card pool, right?
Yeah, I think the first errata must have been during the combat phase, and then they changed it to due to your opponent's effect instead.
Yes. Yeah, it was
I remember. I think
it had to be.
I think even now
during the combat phase, because Felicia also triggered during the end phase.
It hates on Felicia. I'm pretty sure right now it still hates on Felicia. Okay. Because I remember being really, really pissed about that. Because I love Felicia. Felicia was great, but she just wasn't as good as Psyche. And see, I think that Psyche, it had a good trick, but it also had 19 life, and it had to pay that life to do its trick.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a very strong deck, but without the nonsense of Diplomatic. I think it was certainly playing the game too, right? Because its offense was pretty normal, pretty middle of the road. Kind of like Momo, really, I think. But instead of being the tutor for stuff, he got to print momentum and have a big card pool screw.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where, they just didn't want the onus, the onus of burning your opponent to be off of like a combo like that. Like Diplomatic wasn't supposed to be a proactive card, so it was all about just getting the intent to fit the design on that one. But I thought the deck was pretty cool. I do still like the fact that I managed to take a game off you as Morrigan 1-dot from my sideboard, because that's still like one of those random Tom Brady stats where it's like, hey, that undefeated Psyche deck lost 1 game to the 2 actual worst characters on probably the worst symbol at the time. But that's what happens when your opponent doesn't check Fort Negley turn 1, and then also you just draw the absolute nuts turn 2 against a 19 health character, right? So that's that's the kind of. Go ahead.
The thought across my mind too, where that in this format, you're talking about like the aggro mirrors and about just having to go in because you're not safe. Like I'm a huge coward in this format. I haven't played a 7-hand size character like ever. I played some Froppy locally or whatever. I picked up Tokiyami and learned that deck a little bit. But like I've played Kirishima. I played Ochako 2. They got 33 life butthole.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing Momo now. I played Ochako in set 2. I don't play I gotta have that buffer, that life total buffer these days. I can't stomach the 20 life, like just get killed by whatever stuff.
I love that you mentioned that, because that's kind of how that's like a realization I've recently made. Now, whenever I've played 6-handers, I don't make top cuts. And instead of blaming the 6-handers themselves or like my relationship to it, I've analyzed why I chose those characters. And at the time, I wasn't very sure of things in the format, and so playing 20 health didn't feel great. I was genuinely afraid of being able to defend well, so I picked characters that had a little extra health and had specifically good defensive symbols, both times being the life symbol. And I think really the issue isn't so much playing the six-hander, so much as that when I'm confident in my deck and I'm confident in understanding the meta and like being able to take certain decks down, I feel a lot better playing a seven-hander. When I feel adequately prepared, playing a seven-hander feels better because I know I'm going to see more of those cards. I think I've recently started to think that maybe Toga's not very good. I keep hearing things where Toga is really great at like beating down wall decks, and she's got like all this speed and she sees all of her pieces, but at the end of the day, putting one speed, maybe two speed on things, not clearing your card pool ever, and getting some guaranteed life triggers when your maximum is still 20, the pieces just haven't clicked for me, But I bet if I felt safe within the format, I bet if I built the life deck to feel like, I don't lose to two cannon blasts and I can't get stunned out by, just a bunch of punch attacks and things like that, then I probably would feel great playing a seven-hander who gets to always draw off of Excited for Blood.
I just want to say that I thought Toga sucked on day one, and I have not been completely confident that I was right, but not been completely confident that I was wrong either. Even after being completely destroyed by Bromley in Las Vegas.
When I think of Toga, this is so weird. In my head, and again, it's not something that like I will reel off hot takes on a moment's notice. Like I'm a menace on Discord when it comes to just putting it out there. Like, here's a way to look at things. Here's my perspective. But when it comes to Toga, I haven't been sure, but I see her almost as like a worse Sato. Like, she has a draw and discard that functions after an attack. She has speed instead of damage, but stun is relevant. Stun is, we'll talk about it being kind of like +1 speed to everything. And then on top of that, just like the symbols he has kind of benefit that, like it cushions that stun one a bit more. And, I just feel like he has slightly better angles with which to do things. Slightly better timings, right? So that's just kind of where I'm at. Like Toga's response, her filter doesn't really help her block. You have to do it on your turn.
Yeah.
You can't do it reflexively, responsively, however you want to put it. But she does have better defensive symbols overall. And now we've got the hot take in the chat that evil Toga is better than life. So I have to see that deck list. We didn't even go to death. We went straight to evil.
I guess it's to play Tongue Whip. That's a really good card. It gets better at multiples, and Toga's good at finding multiples. So. But
don't get me started on evil ranged attacks. Evil Amphibious Ambush is right there. Like, going what is it? Gale Force Punch into Amphibious Ambush is right there. All you need is a way to pick up the Gale Force again.
I remember I was going to make an analogy to Kirsch. I was going to say that Toga can proc on your opponent's turn if they pay life. So playing Excited for Blood into Toga is a very suspect proposition, which is a very funny fact. And playing All Might True Form into Toga is just stupid. They didn't think of that one. And actually, I'm not 100% sure Toga must just say lose health just like Excited for Blood, but I know Excited for Blood triggers on All Might True Form.
That's actually super funny.
Yeah. It's so sad.
I do think the All Might True Form is a pretty interesting design, but it is kind of weird that there's just certain cards that are like, hey, by the way, you're losing life, and it doesn't specify like during the combat phase or just.
And in a way, they would be. Yeah, I'm glad they don't, because it'd be so clunky and awkward. It reads so nice. The opponent loses health, draw a card. Like, that's just a wonderful ability, but it does screw that guy over. Like it. Well, I don't even have a metaphor for this.
Right. I mean, it's just weird that like some cards do, some cards don't. Most of them are attacks, so it wouldn't be relevant anyway. But can you imagine if Knife Slice was for the game? Just the next time you lose life for the entire game.
Speaking of this, by the way, we were talking a little bit about Lomu. can I just say, I played against Jesse Perez, and I respect that deck so much more than I did before I played that match. You know, I think it is, you know, on paper incredibly favored for Momo, but we played some competitive games, and like, shout out to freaking Exploding Pride. I hit that man with a 0 gravity lift, and he immediately turned around, Exploding Pride's me, and I had to block it, so I lose my thing, but he also immediately triggered Excite for Blood to draw during the enhanced step. It was just savage. It's crushing. It hurt my feelings really badly.
I thought about playing a Lomu deck that just has Snipe on top, and just being like, fuck it, they're not ranged attacks, who cares? Have like all lows in one flow combo.
I think that is I like that instinct of, I think that people overrate, you know, being married to their keywords, right? Like Momo, especially, you know, just yell that you hate. You gotta play Stab Strike. You gotta play Stab Strike. You gotta play all weapon for Stab Strike, and you don't. I built a funny jank weapon. Plays 4 weapons, and I might play it tomorrow, depending on if I want to play that or something else. I built a funny Momo deck that only plays 4 weapon attacks. We're playing 4 bonus staffs, and that's it. And we're playing a ton of all the looter effects and all the. We're playing. What's the balance better card? We're going for any means necessary. We got the boxes full of babies to do some more looting, and we're trying to just have type 50 cards and 4 tongue whips and just tongue whip the crap out of people.
Damn. I actually had 4 tongue whips on my Momo list because I was expecting to play into like wall decks where I would need it, and then of course I played against like nothing. I played against like nothing that was walling except 1-0 Choco deck throwing 0 gravity lift until I drew a face shield, which I never did. And so like I had new training method out all the time, and I'm like, I would love to just check a face shield here, and then I would have to commit it to like pass a check and then check the face shield. Like,
then check the face. Brutal.
We did actually, Daniel's in the chat talking about the critical mass of void discard. We kind of already brought that up. I had mentioned about the soon-to-be discard decks, and, you know, until they get the damage pump, until you can play like a discard deck with a home run comment that follows after it, I don't think we're super scared, right? That was kind of our take was...
That's my take, yeah. I'm, you know, people are scared of throw decks, people are scared of discard decks. And I welcome you guys. Please play those decks because I just am confident in my ability to outplay you on the board with that kind of thing.
Also,
right? Like if you're just trying to do, just pass the torch. Yeah, one card you win, right? Like
if you can actually make me discard 5 cards, beautiful before I block the attacks. Like, you know, that's kind of where we're at. I very highly rate card advantage, and so that just intrinsically makes very good against those kind of decks. Yeah, it's definitely coming. People are definitely going to be trying it. I'm a fan of discard decks in the sense that I hate discard decks, and if they're ever good, I have to play them so I don't fall victim to them. And this is sort of a UFS thing, I think, where if you absolutely hate something, you will be the only person to lose to it. If you are vocally against something, you are actually going to be the only person to ever lose to it, because I don't know of any discard decks that have 1 PTCs or above. Is there a deck where like discard was like its main gimmick, like post 2012, that ever won a major event?
I mean, part of that's because they print so much discard hate, and they want to make sure they're never good.
Like, I guess Railgun Athena, like Silent Assassin might count, but I wouldn't call that a discard deck. That was just a deck that could like do the best discard foundation twice, you know, like it wasn't jammed full of ignites and like you discard a card.
Yeah, it wasn't a discard themed deck. It was a well-rounded deck that had a discard package in it.
Yeah. So the Vegas PTC, I think it was 2016. It's like the last event KOF is ever going to be legal at, and no, it's Reno. Sorry, not Vegas. It's Reno. And I make it all the way to finals, and I have always complained about discard decks forever. I know that someone in Vegas is working on a jury list who has a once per game clear your card pool and your opponent discards 2 cards. They're running the Warned from Battle plus evil Tatsumaki combo where you're supposed to discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards, but you can't draw 2 cards
that
because
combo.
of Tatsumaki. Yeah.
Yeah.
They, of course, errated.
They nerfed out, yeah.
And
it's very disappointing.
So I played Grant Padley. And so I have 4 off-symbol. I think I played Evil. Maybe they're not off-symbol. Maybe it was Death. I think I played Evil Grant Padley because I know I had Navos and I know I had Dragon Flare, but those are both Death. It was probably Death. Death is just like a better symbol.
You probably had Balance Fighter.
Yeah, but the main thing is I had 4 Balance Fighter because Grant discards for cost, so you can basically +1 off of him. Then on top of that, I also mainboarded Sacrifice because sometimes I know I need to just go super deep and like I can turn sideways on any attack, right? So having more cards to go through, like this is like post Bomb Man, I believe. Like this is either right before or right after La Bamba. But people are definitely experimenting with La Bamba at this time for sure because I know I ripped that off, from someone else. And
this was probably after. Yeah, because I know, I think La Bamba's last event was that Worlds.
Yeah.
And that Worlds, we got Street Fighter packs is like our wow, what a cool preview.
Yeah. And so, Daniel's in chat saying, Will Bryan says lots of legacy formats. I did specify after 2012. Because 2008 to 2012 did have discard decks that had, like, discard your whole hand type of shit. Pre that, you had Yoshimitsu Asset, which is literally just fuck your whole hand away. To fuck your opponent's whole hand away, right? So so I've always hated discard as a thing, even though I've never really been privy to it until the Reno finals, where I have all this anti-discard stuff, and I've told this story probably too many times. Where game 1, I get smoked by the dice roll, where I just take 1,000,000 damage early. I try to play 1 attack. My deck plays 8 difficulty attacks, and I ate a fucking Navos. Like. I just tapped out into a Navos after, while going second, it happens. The game 2, I just go, you're a 20 health character, I'm going first. Here's a 12 damage attack, here's a 12 damage attack, and he checks a 3, and he dies. Game 3, I have all my discard hate in. He plays the Tatsumaki first, so I can't add cards to my hand. And I revoke it, and I'm down to 1 card. He then does Warn from Battle, so I go up a card, and I'm like, this is fucking weird but he's filtering. He's not trying to do shit. And then he plays, I think it was, or no, I'm sorry. He Warn from Battles me back up to 3 cards. It's important because he plays a Go Shoryuken, and I'm at 3, and then Go Shoryuken makes me discard a card. And he's just trying to, like, go through enhanced steps. He's trying to, like, filter. He's not really going super serious. And I discard Sacrifice. And I draw, like, 2 shitty blocks. And he's like, well, I didn't want to attack, but here's a Navos on a 7. Taps down 2. And he only has 1 other attack in his hand, but I'm at, like, 9 after this Navos because Jury puts 3 damage on stuff. And he plays a Navos and has to check a 6, and he's like, well, if I check the only 6 in my deck, I win. And sure enough, he checks the Vega Silent Assassin card, which is like literally the only 6 like in the deck, and wins because I discarded Sacrifice. And he's got like 1,000,000 cards in hand. He's got like the card pool clearing like once per game, but he has to play his 4th card, and that's the 4th card. And so I'm like, I have plenty of cards in hand. I have, like, no enhances to play. I have absolutely no enhances in my stage, Like, I'm like, I can turn Grant Padley sideways as, like, my last card and try to block on a 6 now or something. And so I've never lived it down. It has haunted me forever. And I think I'm the only person who's ever been afraid of, like, hand hack decks. And I'm probably the only person who's lost a PTC after 2012 to it.
Base might count as a discard deck because it was, base to hand tax, his enhanced to hand tax, and it was playing Silence, and it was playing. Yeah, I think it won like the first PTC of that season.
Okay. I know it got second because Miles Tyler forgot to do like a Void Assault trigger and take 1 less damage.
Or maybe, if Miles got second, then it probably got second like 3 times.
Yeah, he got second in I went to the Texas PTC and I played the world's greatest Mega Man 2 deck that bubbled out of Top Cuts and was never seen again because it was tri-symbol.
Why couldn't you talk to the other guys playing something cool so I could lose to that and be happy about it?
I mean, I thought that deck was cool as fuck. My original plan was to borrow Shane Duckworth's Railgun Athena deck, which ended up winning because Ryan Pham borrowed it 5 minutes before I asked. And I was like, well, I guess I'll play this Mega Man 2 deck that's really cool but has a lot of forechecks. And then I ended up not making top cuts, I think, because of like a draw, actually. I think I was like X1-2 or something. It was like a 5-round Swiss or some shit, but you know, I ended up having like one too many draws or something because of like a player who was basically learning the game. You know, and we're like not trying to be dicks, but if I was really being honest, right, like I'm like, this should never been a 1-1 type of a thing. So it's just a weird time. It was a weird trip. It was not a great deck in general. It was all in on Rain Flush. And so like so with base, I only remember because there was like specifically a -1 damage that could have literally saved him and back swung and like gone through, you know. But that was a cool event overall. It's the first time I actually traveled for the game was to go to San Antonio's PTC. Yeah. Sorry, we got a little off topic because we got Daniel talking about all the Texas PTC and stuff like that. Not being repaired in that Texas... Oh, the repairings. Oh. I was like, what does he have to have repaired? His car? But he means like the actual pairings for the event. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, it's nice we get so many fewer of those, but Best Coast pairings, like, I can understand people have issues with that software, and that isn't always great, and that it still fucks up buys, but boy, it's great.
They hecked them up, man. I thought the event was cool. I don't remember too much about it. I do remember, you know, there being issues like every event. There's always something. But I do remember definitely from that event just being like amazed at sort of the dominance of the void symbol. You know, the all the different approaches that the void symbol had at that time. Still having the central theme of like attacking your hand, but also just having blankets of damage reduction, having revoke, having caught red-handed, having
you remember when 1,000 Degrees was like not just a tournament staple, but like obviously the reason you play those symbols? It was like such a ubiquitous card.
Which card?
8,000 Degrees.
Yes. Yeah. 8,000
just -1 later.
Having -2 damage on a turn was just so solid. I remember it was
what a great format that the game was played on such small margins.
Yeah. When I saw all the +1s and -1s from the My Hero relaunch, I was excited for like that power level. And then actually playing the game, I played against things like Giro, and I played against Tape Swings, and I played against like Recipro Burst, and I was like, huh, these attacks are all much bigger than Rain Flush. Like, Rain Flush ruined my life. Rain Flush made me almost quit the game. Like, I was so tired of every single deck just going, wow, here's 3 attacks from 2 cards. What a rate, you know? And just being like, here's all my plus damage, and then if you block those first 3, you have 3 cards in your pool, nothing in hand, and they still have 5 cards, you know, and they're gonna play out the rest of their hand and kill you. And now it's like, you know, you like, we didn't have speed resets really at the time, you know, to make multiple 0 speed and 0 damage. And now we have things that reset stuff to 4, which is higher speed than Rain Flush is, you know? So, like, our best defensive tricks are, like, to reset things to a better attack than they were when I started playing the game. And people are trying to tell me that this is a 2014 power level. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I think it is silence, right? I think Rain Flush was good, Gemini Man was better, right? Like, none of these cards are as good as Improved Design or Skullman or, you know, I think certainly like Ochako, Froppy, you know, Recipro Burst, these are designs that are not afraid to get in the that are not afraid to have to ban Froppy later. And I think it's really a testament to the success of design that Froppy was a non-entity almost in set 1. Well, that's actually not at all true, but the aggro Froppy deck was a non-entity. It was the wall deck of all things.
Well, so I preached the wall deck. A lot of people said it was the best aggro deck, and then the versions that were topping were the aggro decks. But that's because anybody who wanted to play wall Froppy got walled out by Kirishima too bad. It was like, I actually have to draw 9 attacks to hit you for more than 1 damage. Excuse me. I remember playing the life version with passing the torch and frog kick, and I think I had Crow and Frog. And I was playing against Bromley with Void Kirishima on tape swings. And, he was just like, this deck absolutely sucks. Why would you play Crow and Frog in it, And, it turns out what that deck needed was damage pump. I wasn't running, Tight-Lipped was there as a 0 diff to flip, not as, damage pump for...
Yeah, it's not a good source of damage when you start flipping you can't burn that candle at both ends, not for 1 damage.
Yeah, and so it was the kind of thing where, just floating around my babies didn't exist. We didn't have the 1 extra draw if Excited for Blood. I wasn't playing Preparing for Battle because the idea of just chewing through my whole hand just to see everything still didn't really matter because he knows he only has to block Frog Lashing. So Tongue Whip didn't exist yet, and even if it had, it still was the one you reduce damage on to pick up your high block for Frog Lashing. So, really Kirishima ban really cleared the way for Froppy to sort of angle out all the other 6-handers, all the other 5-handers, to sort of block out everybody who wasn't able to strictly loop their best attacks, at you off coordinated. And I think it was for the better in the end. I know that you're a big Kirishima 1 fan. I know that you like the decision trees, and I think that that's what people are propping the Momo deck on, is that you had to be smart to play the deck. And I think you have to be smart to play Kirishima 1. I thought you had to have a brain to play that deck too. So I don't think that's a great justification for a character's power level is how difficult it is to play. Because at the end of the day, if you can achieve something that is unhealthy, no matter how difficult it is to pull off, you're still achieving an unhealthy state.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a secondary consideration to kind of that end of the day, how good is this deck? How hard is it to attack this deck? If everyone knows it's the best deck going in and no one can beat it, and everyone knows it's going to be half the field and still no one can beat it, that's a really damning indictment. But I think that we don't see Momo showing up in huge numbers even now. Even as it put it 3 into the top 4, which is pretty similar to a similar age to what Kirishima did way back when. Famously 4-4 in the top 4. But I actually put half of the top 8, and we only 3 of 8. And Momo did very well at Gen Con, but she didn't do that kind of depth, and that's because the deck is harder to play, I think, and that's why you don't see as much adoption. And in terms of what would ruin the game if everyone hive minds out of the same deck, and it's really easy, it's hard to screw up, and it's still the mirror. That would be really terrible. In a way that having a very skill intensive best deck is less bad.
Now, do you think Universes players in general are spoiled on their format's diversity? Do you think that maybe they think that, and I mean just for examples, right? If there's 5 decks that make top cuts in Magic the Gathering, they applaud the diversity, right? If there's 5 decks that make top cuts in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's considered a wide format, and people actually complain about it. People actually get upset in Yu-Gi-Oh! When there's too many decks because they're like, "Wow, it's just random. I don't get to know what I'm playing against ever because all these decks are good." It's actually insane to me. And then you look at a game like Flesh and Blood, which has 16 out of 16 are the same character, the same build almost verbatim. So do you think that maybe we're just a little spoiled because we got our nice little pond and everyone's just down to play what they want and Gabby gets to make top cuts? There's always some Ochakos.
I don't appreciate that implication about he's going to dad or Ochako. That's a real good character. All right.
You got mad I didn't specifically call out the Dobby in my meme video, so I had to name drop Dobby.
I think yes. I think the answer is yes. I think we are incredibly spoiled. I think these especially this micro format has been shockingly good. Like shocking, like so. For how like we all say, oh, it's just small format. There's it'll get better. It is incredibly good. And I think they did a really good job, playing to the strengths of the system and of finding the different ways that people could approach the game and giving them options to play the game they want to play it. I think a lot of decks, a lot of symbols have like glaring holes in them, but are still good symbols anyway. Like I know there's a guy complaining about his Arrow Choco deck sucks too much, and how it has these problems just can't win on turn 2. But like that was like. I think people were unironically saying that's the best character in set 1 at a few points. And that deck, won some, got deeper into the provisionals. And he hasn't. Has Ochako actually won anything?
Ochako 1 is the perennial runner-up. If I had to assume it won anything, it would be like a side event provisional. And Tamron Cardwell did win a 1K, but I think it was about 50 people. So I think it was like about the size of a side event kind of a thing. But Tam did win a 1K with it back in the day.
Yeah, I got my buys for Toronto in playing Ochako in a provisional. Yeah, but it was an Origins one, so it was 6 rounds single, like virtual single limb to get first place. And someday they'll post matches with no game audio from those. To see me completely obliterate a not playing very precisely Jiro deck.
Yeah. There were some rough, there were some rough games recorded at Gen Con. I was watching the stream with a couple people last night. I gotta do my homework, I gotta find my clips. But I don't like to ever, one of the things I don't know if people knows, I never like to try and include misplays. I don't ever try to include like a strict mistake. I don't want to feel like I'm making fun of anybody for that. The closest I ever came is actually in my first video. One of the players symbol locks themselves. They like block with a life card and all their cards are evil, and like that's funny. That's that's kind of like you did it to yourself. It's not really a misplay. He blocked correctly with what he had, So I try not to include strictly mistakes. But there are some featured matches that make you go, okay, these are random. They picked a random game.
It's the format's really, really good, and the format. Maybe some of this too is I get to be a very privileged, experienced player who knows what he's doing. Who has a bunch of good, has thought of the game a lot, knows what's going on. And so I get to beat people with just better skill expression or whatever. But it feels like there's a lot of room for skill expression in this game. It feels like I lose games because I get outplayed, stuff like that, and it's just really I don't know. I can't gush enough about it.
Yeah,
except that I ruined it with Momo because now it's just solved. So
there was definitely a while there where I didn't feel that way personally. It didn't feel like I was winning games. It felt like my opponent was letting me win, making mistakes. And it didn't feel like I was really losing games so much as I would go, well, these are literally the wrong block zones for every attack in my opponent's deck, type of thing. And so with set 2, I think it really brought a lot of that agency back, specifically with the hate pieces. Specifically building Denki for Orlando was something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that deck, but I don't think it was healthy. I don't think having a character that says every time you block, I get to pick the foundation you commit, being able to multiple times per turn have an answer for the only thing that stops my offense, having just like all the extra card draw.
Stadium for Faith Shield, right?
Yes, yeah, Stadium and for Faith Shield and for Breakers, and for Momo's weapons, if I ever fought a Momo, which I didn't back then. Just like Unwavering Slash itself being a charge that replaces itself and readies a foundation, like all of that really, like, it makes it hard to build the deck now, but it's only coming from a place that now I have risk. Now I have to actually have some risk, and that's what I want from the game. I want press your luck to be a part of winning the game. I don't like card games where you're completely safe 100% of the time, and it's really just my deck's going to do its thing and your deck's going to do its thing.
Yeah, and I think Romo, despite being a very safe, ends up having a lot of that play, and end up getting really pissed off on how many threes. So I feel like it must just be selection bias. I don't know if it happened last at Toronto this weekend, but it feels like you just play a game, you just check all the fucking threes, and like you're just trying to draw any foundation for your new trading method. And it's just all threes.
I will not play Magic the Gathering like for more than just what takes get to Mythic every now and then. Specifically because of land screw, and it's selection bias. It's the same thing, right? If I check all the threes and it makes no sense, like I built the deck with the correct amount of lands in it, that other people who are smarter than me have done the math and selected the correct amount of lands, and yet if I draw 3 in a row, I fucking lose the game. If I don't have a play for 3 games in a row, my opponent sticks one fucking dork on the board, I probably lose the game, right? So, it's hard for me to take Magic seriously with stuff like that because I couldn't choose not to draw that land. It was not up to me to not draw that land. When it comes to universes, I can choose not to play that attack. When it comes to blocking with the threes, it's different, right? You're kind of forced to block and blah blah blah, right? But even then, you can choose not to pass certain things. You can choose to to still make decisions there. But like when I check 3 threes in a row to play 3 attacks in a row, it absolutely feels bad. It absolutely feels like, well, it can't be a third one, statistically. But at the same time, I could almost always have just played a foundation, done literally something different to not check that 3 and draw it next turn. Whereas when it comes to a game like Magic, like I usually don't have that choice. I usually don't get to just say, oh, well, I'd like to not draw this turn and scry it to the bottom or whatever. So,
I think I was reacting to press your luck, and there's certainly, that level of variance is always going to be in the game. And I do like, as you said, it's not too safe, and there is still that variance. And one thing we're calling people entitled. If I could just like roast, unnamed members of the community, like you are only entitled to sit down and have access to the same cards as your opponent and to play a fair game of UFS. If you lose the die roll, now you're behind, right? And now you have to catch up for that somehow. Maybe that's getting really lucky on some checks, or maybe that's outplaying the crap out of them. But you're only going to win half the games unless you can outplay them, unless you can outluck them. And I think that I lost I switched champs twice in a row, and then immediately lost. I put myself in the best possible position, and then just got bodied. Mm-hmm. And it was just like it was kind of abstractly frustrating that I put myself in a good position and then couldn't get anything out of it, and especially I was looking to qualify for Worlds, and the point system is incredibly top heavy. 16th place is barely better than last place for that.
Yep.
But it was like, I can only win half the time, and I did my best. I liked most of how I played in those games, and I said, well, what can I learn from this loss to try to do better next time? And also, I think I might have, and Steve, now like Gio got nerfed, but I wonder if I was over too much going into that camp, saying I just accept that I could lose half the time and that I could have done better in that matchup. But yeah, like the big point being just like it's a game of luck and skill, and you can't win them all, no matter how good you are. And this is, I guess, plenty to say from the guy who won all of them, but last weekend. I played in the provisional and got bodied by Fourth Kind, and Fourth Kind is a huge asshole.
Yeah.
That guy, if you want to say you want to play a game without luck, do not get paired to fourth kind because you cannot play the game and not get screwed by him having the right block zone to double block your attacks, or having the insane turn one build into like double passing the torch and just a 25 hand size with a million more resources than you, or just reveling off the 4-hit string with all 5 checks on turn 2 and just completely destroy you. He's a very strong character, and a character that's you can't beat while being completely safe. It's almost impossible to beat him while being completely safe.
Yeah, he definitely presents a lot of different angles that you don't really see on paper until you see the deck in action.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, I only have a +3 mid, which means I don't get to block this extend, Oh, I only have 1 low block, which means as soon as he plays 1.3 as his second attack, you have to start questioning things. Right? So,
yeah. And I really love fourth kind too. I just want to say, I haven't brought up one of my favorite mechanics, the zone mix-up, right? Fourth kind's playing all these electric trolls, and you're like, well, I can't block an electric troll, and I'll still take 1 damage. And he's like, here's a reciprocal extend. It's like, well, I can't block a reciprocal extend. Like, it's easiest to block zone, but also the zone he's expecting to get blocked the most, and you have to guess he's going to have highs or lows, right? Like, I got destroyed by fourth kind playing like setup strike into 5% full cowling, and it's like, well, I was holding low blocks for your reciprocal burst. Shoot.
Yep, I've lost a lot of games to fourth kinds just because they play extend, high engine kick, build. Extend, high engine kick, build. And you're just
dude,
like...
I love that Yogi so much of like, he's playing 2 attacks, he's got 1 more, I gotta be ready for the +4 damage. He's like, here's a 1 difficulty foundation with -4 difficulty. You're like, you're not supposed to do that!
And he just drew 2 new cards. He drew an additional card, and he cycled 1. So you're like, man, he saw 7 cards this turn? Maybe he passing the torch to requested, like he's got the draw symbols, so it's like, there's a lot of little things that there's just a lot of little things that you have to really account for, and I think designs like that are really cool, like the sort of open-ended, strong once per turn. I don't think once per games are essentially healthy for the game, but I do think that I do think like the once per turns where you play them somewhere like in the string rather than like Ochako, usually it's always the first one, but it doesn't have to be. I think it's really cool.
My favorite Ochako play, and someone called me a war criminal for doing this, is just opening with Meteor Shower, and they're like, fine, I'll take 5, and you're like, cool, electric jolt.
And they're like, I'll still take 1 from that, so I'll take it. Yeah, the plays where you get to, and that's where I get tripped up. I try to deviate. I try to do cool stuff. I try to do the key play. I walked into a force. You gotta calculate
accurately before you go on the funny stuff.
Yeah, I walked into a forcing surrender against Tam on what I thought was a kill turn because I had the math wrong, because it's the only game where I was like, oh, you're tracking the health on screen? I won't. Like, it was the one game where my opponent had the health in view for me, so I like put my phone to the side because it was going to die. It was the last round. I'm like, all right, this works. Like, it all clicked, and then it's the one time where I was like, oh, I looked up at the health wrong, right? And so, as I'm going through the turn, I'm like, okay, I need this stun too. And if he pitches my foundation, that's fine. My amphibious is still activated on this attack, And, walking it back, if I had known the right life totals, not only do I play everything totally different.
I'll still be listening, but I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah. But so, in this game, I'm, like, completely fine with eating the forcing surrender. And we talked about it earlier where just getting rid of weapon blocks and stuff like that is really strong. So I was like, okay, well, I think he only had the 1, maybe he had 2. So I'm like, I got to go through these anyway. I'm okay with him flipping this resource now. I probably want to hold momentum that I have for something later anyway, right? Like, it's probably never going to get actually used for that purpose. But I was fine with it. And then after you walk into it and the stun 2 goes through and you end up failing the kill turn by checking that 3, you know, it looks really foolish and really stupid, but at the time, it was a play that I'm willing to make. It's a play that I'm calculating, and I go, okay, all day, nobody has actually forcing surrendered my combo fodder on Capture Net out of my card pool, but I know Tamron Cardwell's not going to miss that. And because it's a passing the torch, I think I only had the 1 foundation in my hand anyway. Because it's a passing the torch, I know for sure he's going to kick it out of my card pool. But when it comes to gameplay, like, that's where the beauty of the game comes through, I think, is making a suboptimal play still work. Making, you know, no one cares if you're Magical Christmas Land. Like, I think this is kind of a symptom of other card games, and I don't want to blame, like, other communities or other designs, but all the time I hear people go, what if Minetta 1 plays a Grasping Tape Toss, uses sticky balls to clog your pool, then plays a Tongue Whip, then does an Amphibious Ambush, and then gets momentum to then stun to you, and then his 6th attack is Tape Swing and kills you, and you're like, sure, bro. I will die to those 6 attacks from a 6-hander. You know? And I did that once, I think in the only Webcam Weekly I played against, I think one of the Mississippi boys, it might have been Brad Townsley, who was playing Minetta 1, and I was playing, I think it had to be Ochako. No, it was All Might. I was practicing for the first ever provisional. This is pre-first online provisional, the one that you won at One Life. Which that meme is in my video if you want to check that out on YouTube. So I'm playing All Might, and I'm at like 27. I think I already partial blocked something. He's got 1 momentum, right? And I'm like, all right, you have 5 foundations after your turn 2. This is my turn 2. I'm going to tap completely out and put you at 3. And I remember the phrase, you can't 27 me. And he plays exactly 5 difficulty attacks or some shit, or like all 5s and a 3 or and a 4 or something, and they all start. He just has sticky balls, and it's like, here's a 7 damage throw, and here's a 7 damage move, and then here's a, you know, like whatever, a tongue whip or whatever. I think it was order though, but it was like on the 4th attack, it's like, and this one's a tape swing, and I'm gonna think fast and then discard a momentum, and it's like 10. You know what I mean? Like, and so I did the same thing to a Midnight player at the Vegas regional, because 6-handers make me feel safe, and they make me make bad plays all the time, because I did the exact same thing. I said, I'm at full, I'm no Chaco 1 in Vegas. I look at a Midnight player and I go, I'm going to tap completely out, and it's fine because I have a Faith Shield, and my 1 ready foundation is a release. So I'll just release and Faith Shield your first attack, and you have to commit foundations to make me not be able to block it. You'll probably take that risk. And what ends up happening is I go, all right, you can't 27 me, pass the turn. And they go, 1.3 million, stun release, plus 5 damage, plus 3 speed. It's 6 low for 10. I'm like, all right, I'll take that. I'm at 17. And they go, home run comet, plus 3 speed, get the momentum, spend the momentum for plus 3 damage. It's for 7. I'm at 10. And then they go, home run comet, get the momentum, plus 3 speed. Remember to activate Stronger in Darkness this time to get 210 damage and kill me with exact lethal. You know? And I was like, damn. This man did exactly 27, and he missed 1 damage throughout the turn. You know? So it's little stuff like that where, you know, I had never seen a Midnight deck before. In my head, just the whole thought process is, well, if you don't want me to be able to block this, you actually have to commit resources. And then they did commit resources. You know, I've got like Ochako ready block on a 6. And if any of those were sent for 3 speed, if they did not shore up every possible, you know, thing, if they were like, oh, well, I want to play a 4th attack, so maybe I don't commit 1, let's see what is, maybe he partial, like, all of that, they had to still play perfectly. There's still many decisions they had to make, and they still had to draw pretty much those exact attacks.
And I hear so many stories of, you know, I won the game because he checked a 3 on a block. I won a game, you know, at One Life. I, you know, checked 2 3s to miss the kill, all that kind of stuff. or like, you know, if we both check 5s, then I win, but I checked a 3, so you win instead. Like the margins for a lot of games really aren't that big. And there's so much room for, if you live that turn at 1 because he missed that 1 point off of the Stronger in Darkness, that'd have been, you know, he'd never forget that game.
Yeah.
And then imagine how much money we're all leaving on the table in deck construction and all the million ways you can make mistakes there. And
how many times you're just like, man, I wish I had one more copy of this speed reset, or I should have brought 1+1 low block, you know? One of the things,
sideboards even, jeez.
One of the things that kind of blows my mind is 0 self-sacrifice for the Momo decks. You're talking about how release sets up like the little quick creation plays. I always love to do it with self-sacrifice. That's like my pet card, I guess, for you know, just to actually get something for it. And then, of course, having a good block mod. All my testing games I played against Momo, I won by just saying, I'm going to wait till I have all my low attacks. Because all your tutorable low blocks are +3s. And now, of course, the evolution is to include the Shining Naval Laser Beam, the +1 low that hates on momentum. You know?
I had 3 of those since day 1, and my very first game against Giro with that deck ever actually was in the top 16 of Orlando, and my opponent was sure playing Giro, and I killed all of his electric jolts before he got to do anything funny with them.
Yeah, exactly. So like that was a big pickup for me because I was like, I just want this block mod on this zone, and now I'm adding momentum hate, which became super relevant. I wouldn't have survived half as many turns as I did against the Ochako, which, in retrospect, having lost the one game that we played in 50 minutes, maybe I wanted to lose much sooner, but, you know, at the time, getting rid of their first 0 gravity lift was huge. Otherwise, I would have just been getting milked for 3 damage pretty much every turn. And so, you know, especially off the back of Back Alley Haymaker, right? So that kind of stuff would not have been...
Ochako is such a ridiculously good character to have so few results.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is the play patterns. I see a lot of people, like, it's one of those things where both of these are incorrect and correct in deciphering which one is the best. But, like, when I play Ochako, I pick up my attacks on my turn immediately, almost every time, because it feels so good. But generally, I think you want to bank at least some momentum. And a lot of the times, having like a more explosive turn later is how a 6-hander wins those games. Whereas for me, especially because I was playing the Frog Lashing variant, I'm like, oh, well, if I just pick this up, all my stuff's ready, they're not going to block this one, and I can just yeet another completely safe 8-9 damage attack at them and force them to have it, which is exactly how I lost to the Midnight player. Because I would just check poorly and go, okay, well, I didn't have it, but let's see if they do, and they did. So a lot of times it comes down to recognizing what a better play for later is, and off the heels of set 1, the turn 2, and even into set 2 with the Life Oswey, like the turn 2 bridge is so scary. And that's why I picked Momos, because I'm like, this is the best character for getting over that turn 2 hump, getting into that quote-unquote mid-range, which turn 3 shouldn't be mid-range, but, you know, I have my own opinions on how to qualify that stuff.
I know on the Unfun Stuff podcast they were talking about, does mid-range mean anything?
Yeah, that's... I think that's a whole podcast in and of itself. We could talk about that for 2 hours easy. I think, which I was actually planning tomorrow, I was planning to live stream and talk about basic defenses, i.e. like codifying defenses into a condensed moniker, right? Like how you have for chess, you have the Swiss defense, you have the... What is it? The pawn 4, I think. Huh?
Like names of openings, like the Sicilian defense, or
yeah, exactly.
Like the Italian game, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like, and so for me, I have a couple presets. I have like a what's the word, like a level 0 automatic kind of a thing where like some of the defensive techniques I use are first and last, right? Where you block the first attack no matter what, because you have a really good block mod, you have a good zone, you're trying to go fast, whatever, and you're not trying to give anything up for free, and it's a card you want to review anyway. But then the other card is really good, and it's turn 2 or whatever, so you're only going to block the first one to give nothing for free. You're going to block the last one because it kills you. You're going to block the lethal attack, right? And so there's also times where I'm like, I don't want any of these cards in my hand. I know the opponent can't actually deal this much damage if I do block 3 attacks, so I'm going to block everything. That's a time where I block everything. These are 3 cards I want to review. These are 3 cards I don't want next turn, so I'm willing to block everything, right? Then there's times where I have all these cards in my hand where it's all hands on deck, the gates are wide open, hopefully my opponent doesn't attack me, right? And the thing that I want to do, like a thought experiment where we kind of not only codify these things, but then talk about how do you get into that position. We talk about what does your board have to look like to pull that off. And I think that's where I'm not very good at that, and I think a lot of people kind of struggle because I've gotten a lot of success in this game, making top cuts basically, just from presenting my board state as if I know what I'm doing. From just having the confidence to say, I'm going to build 5 down to 1, and this one better be really good, right? Like, I'm an extremely greedy player. I almost always hold 2 cards. Like, I almost always end my turn with 2 cards no matter what my hand size is, no matter who I'm playing, no matter what I'm doing. Part of that's because of progressive difficulty, but part of that's because I'll play a character like All Might. Because I'll play a Passing the Torch, a Momo who can afford these things. Those are the characters I gravitate towards. But even when playing Tokoyami, I'm going to play every non-attack out of my hand. I'll be okay with blocking with attacks because the ones that I have probably have Breaker, and recognizing should I be blocking the first and the last is Tokoyami, or should I be blocking everything is, I guess that's something I take for granted because I've had people in my chat saying, like, even just explaining small little basics has been super helpful for them. So that's something I wanted to focus on. For you,
I think that's really interesting. I just want to say, like, I've started thinking of this kind of in terms of like moods, and not even that you necessarily rationally choose what mood you're in. Sometimes if you're at 1 life, you're in the mood of blocking every single thing completely and taking no damage because you're at 1 and you will die. So obviously that's kind of chosen for you. But on turn 2, sometimes you want to be in that mood anyway. You want to say, I'm not going to use a single inch. You attack me 3 times, great. You're just going to tap out and you're not going to get anywhere anyway. And honestly, like, I've done that a lot where if they decide to attack me 3 times, that third one's on a 6 and they're going to check a 3 because they can't be that lucky, right? And then now they're open, and now you get to now you are ahead in this game because they overextended on 2, because you said I'm going to block everything. And conversely, if you're setting up for the kill, you might be in the mood of blocking nothing and just saying you have to put me to dead before I will consider blocking. And this is both valuable to like make your life easier if you just decide ahead of time how you intend to block, or like, I will only block frog lashing is a plan to use against Froppy, for instance. Saying I will only block frog kick if I have face shield, because then
That's I can face shield, by the way, for anyone who's trying to fight Froppy, especially now, it's frog kick. That's the one you face shield. Yes, it's both slowest and also it actually takes something away from them when you do it. Really materially. Although there's also a mixed bag there because if you block the early ones, maybe they'll run it progressive difficulty sooner, but it's weird. And yeah, just that this is both valuable to know in terms of making your own life easier, of saying I'm going to take a shot and I'm going to guess this is the way I want to go. If I'm tapped low, well, I need to block later. I can only block once. And actually also just like, can I block once? Can I block 2 times? Can I block 3 times? Those are huge differences in how much and how you can plan your turn. If you think I can only block once because I'm playing against Froppy, whose attacks are all 6 speed, I can't pass 2 of those, so I got to block the one that's most important. Yep. That's one. But then also, go ahead. I was going to say reflectively, your opponent's defending too, and so if you can do some psychology and say, well, I think you're in a
block everything mood. So how can I exploit that? Well, I can, you're holding too many cards in your hand, so I'll just build foundations and strand some of those in your hand if you review step. Or you can say, you're in a block nothing mood, so I will take I'll take that's free real estate. Let's just go, manifest destiny right in there for 10 damage. And that's a really valuable space just to even develop any level of understanding in, because it just makes your life so much easier when you're playing the game, and you can focus your attention elsewhere if that's just kind of automatic to you.
Yeah, for me, it definitely comes down to compartmentalizing information. I don't think I'm not a math guy. I'm not here to sit here, and I'm not one to sit here and do all the odds and think of like every single possible play, because I think that's where you get bogged down with that analysis paralysis. I think that's when you start to lose to bad hands, is when you start to think that your opponent has an amazing hand and you try to play as if they have the amazing hand every single time. And I think the thing I've heard a lot from people in my chats and in my comments and things like that is, why can't anyone teach me how to play this deck? Why are there no video tutorials how to play the deck? And it stumped me because I don't really watch too many other deck profile videos. I usually just go and grab the list and I kind of figure it out for myself. Half the fun is playing it and seeing what works and things like that. But when I want to jump into like a competitive format for like Magic the Gathering, or I want to hop on Master Duel and like play at the higher ladder ranks and climb a bit, a lot of times I can just Google what cards to counter. I can just Google what the win condition is. I can just Google, like, the last deck I played, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, once they split the ladders, to a casual and a ranked, I jumped in the ranked, and I had a deck that basically told me the combo because the card is yellow. So I activated special effect, which summons only one option, and then it's yellow, and then I activate it, and I have two options, and one of them does something on my opponent's turn, one of them does something now, so I do the one now, and then it glows, and I activate it, and then I go and I search for the one glowy card in my deck that's a valid, you know what I mean? Like it's literally up to me playing that deck. For anyone who's a Yu-Gi-Oh fan watching this, it's Prank Kids, and they all have like this once per turn effect, this hard once per turn. So literally it's up to me to search my deck and pick a different card that I haven't used the hard once per turn on. And that's the deck. And people have like an entire video explaining how you do that combo because they're not playing on Master Duel. Master Duel is not glowing all the cards for them, right? So, I'm a little spoiled in that sense that for me, I don't see our game ever being that way. I don't think you can ever say, oh, well, if you're playing this Momo deck and you draw back alley, you can build this 0, and this 0 will make you do this and then this. And, there's just too much, because every card in this game is a fucking counter spell. Every single card in this game has a block modifier, and to me, when I think of an attack, it's got two components. It has its stats, and it has its effects. And I think we often think of counter spells and control decks as decks that negate the effects. Like Nightwatch, would people think of blue from Magic, when in reality, the blue part is not taking damage, because if you don't take damage, that attack goes away. Just like as if you negated the spell. If the attack deals no damage, it doesn't become a presence or a resource for later the way that a card hitting the board in Magic does. And so while negates are my favorite thing to do, blocking is actually what I want to do in this game the most. That is actually the counter spell. And so this game gets tough for people because every deck that you play against immediately transforms into a control deck on your turn. It's just depending on whether or not they can actually, their control effects are that good.
It's in terms of actions per minute, there's not per minute per se, but actions per turn perhaps.
Per card.
There's so many actions per turn.
They're bros per minute.
But it's how many things do you have to do in an enhanced step, right? And then how many enhanced steps do you have to play to win the game, and how many how much other complexity is there embedded in and around those attacks to ever win a single game of UFS. Yeah, this complexity is why we play this game, right? Like we're all hooked, but yeah, it is wildly different than a lot of other games. Like even just like giving someone how long would it take Ryan Field to explain to someone how to play Froppy, right? The Gen Con Froppy that still have Frog that you can play on easy mode relative to what it is doing now. It's still a lot of stuff, even if they already understand how to make a control check and how to draw their hand size and how to calculate damage output or whatever. There's still so much going on in there, and they invite more of that too. With it's all the layered interactions, all the reasons to play 1 and 2 outs, all the reasons to play 80 cards in your deck. When's the last time someone played 51 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah, and
is that even legal?
The last time people played more than 40 cards was when they put literally every package in the game together. They just jammed every good version of a deck, like every engine, They just said we can actually play all of them because they all search. And you have to have specific counters for each one, right? So you don't know which version the deck's going to go off, so you don't know where to ash. But the other one was there's a card that says if you have 20 more cards in your deck than your opponent, mill half your deck. So it's called The Grass is Always Greener. Literally, those are the reasons to play more than 40 in that game. And those decks are not ones that you really have to teach people. They're ones that you either already know because you know how to play all the other decks, or The Grass is Always Greener just dumps your win condition. And, I think that when it comes to other games, you have a very specific win condition. And that very specific win condition, you have to teach people how to get there and what to do when it's interrupted or where it's interruptible, right? Like where we actually shut down the combo so that they can't do it again because it's a once per game, like there's no recursion. Like once this is in the discard pile, you've won the game because they don't have a win condition. And for our game, I think the win condition is generally getting to a position where your opponent can't answer your threats. It's maneuvering to a position where your opponent does not have answers. And the hard part is making them use them. The hard part is running face first into them and still having a game plan after being countered. Which, when you draw up to your hand size, you can make those gambits. When you have defense and a potent offense, you can play both sides. And I think we're finally seeing decks that get to do both, because I don't think Momo is anemic on offense. I do think that she has a lot of the same counters, right? Like she has a lot of if you reset the speed to 4 on a Cannon Blast, it's not that impressive, but she gets to play with that. She gets to hold on to the +1 speed, right? She gets to modify it. So a lot of times you're like, okay, well, I have to block this at 6 speed instead of 4, because if I reduce the speed now, she just puts more speed on it. And that's the beauty. That's the cool part. It's gonna sound, maybe this is a bad pitch. Maybe people from Jasco don't want to hear me say this, but the game is the most beautiful when no one is playing optimally. You're making optimal decisions, but your deck is not performing optimally.
Okay. And I think, I think a lot in terms of,
it's just one of those things where the emerging.
I think it's great when people can play optimally, but the optimal choice is like choosing a mixed strategy, right? Yes. Do something 40% of the time, or do this. If you are always attacking, there's a lot of beauty in this game, I guess. Actually, we don't even have to have one correct answer.
If your entire game plan is to just say Stronger in Darkness enhance as many times as possible and repeatedly do it, then it doesn't matter much what you're doing, right? It doesn't. The emergent gameplay for you is choosing to commit Stronger in Darkness last or something like that. But when we have to play around damage resets and we have multiples, right? And we're like, okay, well, they're just going to keep passing. I have to choose when to stop. That is surprisingly difficult for a lot of people. That is something I
Oh no, it's crazy hard.
Yeah, like I found myself doing that a lot early on where I'm like, oh, well, I got to make them use it. And in reality, I don't. I have to send this as a suboptimal attack rather than forcing them to use it because I'll get more now. And instead of being afraid, because I'm always afraid my opponent's just going to kill me, right? Like, I'm always afraid that if I send it back to my opponent, that they're going to draw the absolute nuts. But I think as time goes on, we're getting a little more comfortable in our skin. We're getting a little more comfortable playing defense. And a lot of that may be due to the wall decks that Keenan Meadows has been afraid of. Do you think that there's like a wall busting problem? Do you think is there any deck that's like really good at wall busting?
I mean, I think, part of it is that I think we are seeing a somewhat of a dominance of symbols that don't have as many options for doing that kind of stuff. I think we're seeing, life doesn't get to do anything. We're seeing, symbols like death and evil that really get to touch your opponent's cards a lot, really falling by the wayside. No one's entering with a deck. No one is even building evil decks because they suck. Frankly, but
I'm trying to, man. I got like so many evil Mezzo Shoji lists that are just not the It feels good to pick up Dropkick Slicer every turn, though.
Ooh, spicy. And so I think that's part of the element of that. That's why we're seeing these wall decks. It's just that there's somewhat of a paucity of things that are good at pinpricking things, finding the weak spot, and then trying to exploit it. And just there's. On the other side, there's also a relative lack of big snowbally stuff. That's kind of, in my head, kind of the dichotomy of you have the very interactive deck, you have the very big deck, the deck that goes big, and neither one of those are super well represented. And also, in terms of that, plans of blocking stuff, a lot of decks are not very well equipped to have people who say, I'll block everything. There's not, there's double jet pummel now, but there's not a ton of cards that say, yeah, if my opponent blocks me up front, I'm already pretty happy about it, right? There's not things that pay you off for that. Or I love the way that this was forever ago. I don't even remember when it was, but Tim Keefe was talking about how to play some particular deck, and he said, yeah, just play attacks so that you're indifferent to your opponent blocking them. That either they spent the card in their hand, they made the control check, they had the progressive difficulty, they pay the cost of the speed, and that outcome is good enough for you, or they took the damage and that outcome. It was Morgan 1 actually, forever ago, but it was a character with a weird cost, and paying that weird cost that punished them for blocking. That was how to evaluate it. Was say, if you don't block, I'm happy because I got damage to. If you do block, I'm happy enough because, you had to pay it added speed to the attack and one of the things.
So, I want to ask you. We're wrapping it up a bit here. We've been at this for over 2 hours, so I want to thank you for joining me off the back of your Canadian regional license exam win. But I want to get your thoughts on one final thing here, and we've talked before on the podcast, and the community in general has talked a lot about things like a rotating ban list, even restricted limited lists, things like that. I want to talk overall, just a little bit bigger. How do you feel about set rotation? Because I personally am a fan of ushering in new formats, and generally the number one way to do that for most games is set rotation, but I can understand why a lot of people are not fans of it. How do you feel about set rotation?
So I hate when I don't get to play with my deck anymore. Like my decks usually if I'm playing them a lot, and I'm very sad when they either get banned or when they start rotating out. And so I really disliked the old UFS set rotation where they said 10 sets in the standard, guys, and every time we drop a new set, your deck gets fucked. That was just a lot of, fortunately they didn't release very many sets, so it wasn't that bad.
It's kind of a mixed bag, if you will.
Yeah, like there were a lot of times where that was like the silver lining, and we were all anxiously mixed bagging about when they announced the set date was going to be in 3 months or whatever. It's like, well, I gotta get I gotta play with these cards before they rotate. Like, what's the last thing we're gonna do? once this card has been sitting kind of on the sidelines, waiting for a home, but now it's gonna be our last chance, so we gotta play this before it's gone, kind of stuff. So I mean, I think we're a ways away from that happening for My Hero at all, and hopefully they come up with something coherent when that happens. I think that Magic has been kind of, they obviously have rotating standard, and they rotate, I think, once a year or something like that. But then they also have just been making, they had Modern, and that was a big idea that says we're not going to rotate the format that's newer than Legacy, and they've just been making new Moderns every couple of years, because they have Pioneer, they have, yeah.
There's Explorer now, which I don't know if that sounds like an offshoot of Pioneer, because I don't think Pioneer was super popular, but I only pay attention to Arena.
Yeah, they keep making new formats, like Alchemy and shit.
Yeah, they have Historic instead of Modern.
Yeah.
Give me Modern.
And so I like those in kind of like the spirit of, if you don't want to get cards that are 10 years old, we're just making a new format that's 5 years old, and that's like old enough for it to have its own format again.
That's what I really want.
Yeah, and I think it's tricky with the whole history of universes and all the we don't have anymore and all that stuff. Yeah. I was really big in retro, a really big proponent of retro, and loved the tournament series we had during COVID with that. It was great playing with, I have a lot of fond memories of all those cards. But there's a bunch of logistical problems with all that stuff. And some of those are just tough problems of having those old cards.
Now, hopefully they can take ideas from us on this. I know some things it gets a little weird if it doesn't come from within, but tell me how this would sound to you. Now, I think that having a standard set rotation of 6 sets, and now I don't know, this is all contextual to how many sets you plan to put out, right? Because Magic rotates once a year. They put out like 9 sets a year for standard, and then when they rotate back down to or if you include the core sets, like there's more than that, right? But they like rotate down to like 4, and then they fill it back up. So you still have cards from like last year, and then it rotates back down, and that stuff's cool, but it's a little complicated if you're just trying to learn about it. I just let Arena tell me when my shit's not legal anymore. They just do a whole graphic. It's called renewal. They have words for everything. They have a keyword term for literally everything. Anyway, so for me, I think if you had a 6
keyword, the term keyword is already itself a keyword term for keywords, isn't it?
We can't get started here. One of the things I love about card games is the language that spawns from it, like Bolt being shorthand, even though it doesn't seem like a moniker, it really is a moniker for all kinds of things, right? So, and all card games steal from Magic, Dredge, Mill, whatever. But for me,
they finally made Mill a real word.
Yeah, which I'm super happy about. It's so smart.
Yeah, it's nice.
The smartest thing Magic the Gathering has ever done is just steal from their fan base, no cap.
Yes.
Integrate, not steal. Integrate their fan base, but so tell me how this would sound to you. The 6 most recent sets are your standard, and then everything after that is My Hero only. That's My Hero set that has been printed is legal in the Silver Age format. So it's literally every single My Hero card ever made is legal in the Silver Age format. Your standard My Hero format is the 6 most recent sets, and they reprint cards into newer sets. They can reprint, specialized sound waves, God forbid, but if they wanted to, that's just the first one that came to mind, they could reprint that into a later set. So if set 1 rotates, they can just reprint anything they want into the newer standard, right? Because they have the license, which is not something we've really been privy to in the past because of how quickly sets come out. And then the teams format. So you go to a major, you have your singles is standard, and your teams format is your Silver Age format. And that way, your team's format, you have a bigger card pool to build multiple decks from. This way, we're only adding one event. We don't have to have a standard, a standard tournament and then a Silver Age tournament and then a team standard and a team Silver Age. You just kind of have that, and that would be like your soft introduction, I guess. Because when it comes to teams, you're still playing like a single player game experience. So I don't think that would hurt the experience for too many people. I don't think anyone.
They need to fix that.
Huh?
They need to fix that. You should be able to talk to your teammates.
I don't hate that idea, except for the fact that I would, be in the middle of my game and it'd be like Tim Keefe and you coaching somebody I'm playing. I don't need that. I don't need 3 minds working against me. But I don't hate that. I don't see. I've watched actually a lot of Magic teams recently, and a lot of the times you can't tell what they're saying, so I don't know how much it would really affect me as a player. I do wish I could just talk to my teammates, even if it wasn't coaching, but obviously that would be like hard to police, right? So like, if it lets me just tell my teammates like something other than what game we're on, I'm super down for it. Because I would love to just communicate.
Yeah, and I think the big thing from what I've read, I haven't really engaged with Magic much in a while, but I remember really reading tournament reports and people were saying like, when you play in teams, like there's a big bandwidth problem. Like if you just look over your friend's friend's game, they might ask you a question and say, hey, I'm 50-50 between these things. You'll kind of look at it and be like, yeah, that's a 50-50. Like, go with your gut, honestly, because you don't see you haven't been playing with their opponent. You don't see what's going on the board. You don't have all the knowledge of what's happening. You can just try to take a educated guess within 6 seconds before you get back to your game. And I think that, coaching would be a thing. You don't want to have someone else playing the game for you. But for the most part, unless it's a relatively simple mechanical thing, you actually can't coach someone because they can't tell you all the information that they already know.
Right. I will say one of the big things that would help is having the communication between teammates means your teammate can take notes for you to speed up the game process and make sure that notes are like detailed and quality notes is a legitimate skill. It's something I don't ever practice. It's something I tell myself I'm going to do, and then I start playing the game, and like I think it was like with Denki with Sports Festival Stadium against a Toga player. I was like all ready to take notes on everything, and then I was tracking -1 health so many times I just said fuck it. I'm not taking any notes, and like you see the line that you want to play and you're just like, nah, fuck it, there's no time for this. We're focused on the board state, But I would love to see that. I would love to see a standard format that has rotation, if only because they never have to ban cards at that point. Strictly, well, not never, but like, for example, 2 years from now, I'm going to be tired of seeing certain cards. I'll put it that way. There's going to be cards that I wish I didn't necessarily always have to play against. And instead of asking them to ban a card that was designed in 2017 for a format that was in 2020 that got printed in 2021 without that format, like I'd rather it just be gone because it's been long enough and I can choose to play that format. And that format will be deeper and wider, and I'll be less likely to play against only that kind of a card. I think a card like Face Shield is a card that you could easily reprint, but also have a couple years where Face Shield just wasn't legal, and then it comes back.
Yeah, and I think, I can see that. I think, just my experience, I think that super cards are frustrating much sooner than, we get more sets behind it. It becomes less frustrating because, they print counterplay to it. They print just some new thing to be pissed at.
Yeah.
And that's my immediate thought. It's really that, but yeah, and I think there's certainly merit to rotation. There's if Froppy is still be Froppy plus Paxton Torch plus Frog Kick is still going to be kicking around the metagame. Like you don't need to ban Frog Kick, but you get sick of it sooner or later. And yeah, it's better. You want that to just be part of the game in perpetuity, just because they printed it once way back. As you said in 2017, they came out.
Yeah. And Also, the big thing when it comes, at least to the Magic rotation, it's specifically there to combat power creep. You don't have to power creep
Yeah.
a card from years ago or deal with people saying, oh, well, why would I play these cards from set 2 and 3 when the cards from set 1 are better? You kind of organically solve that issue by just letting them know, hey, you're not going to play with these cards, and now all of a sudden your 3 difficulty, 3 check flash card that only draws a card and does nothing else starts to look a lot better, if that's your only option. There will, of course, always be people that complain. We had the issue in the Discord recently where people complain that older cards are much better or whatever, and that's all subjective to the format they're supposed to be in, right? So I think that it naturally lets you curb power levels by saying, okay, we just don't have to print anything as good as this card that's going to rotate.
And I love the theory that you kind of have like the water wheel or whatever effect. This is on top today, but then we're not, and then it's going to fall off. And people who really love, I saw a preview video for Dominaria the other day, and they were talking about like Wizards hasn't printed boards like this in 10 years. Like there's like 2 mana, like all your elves get +1/+1. Like we haven't done that in forever, and it's like. Yeah, well, now they're like they fell off. They were really big for a while. And they, if you really like that, you had to go play Modern for a little bit. But now they're coming back into Standard, and you'll just do the power cycle where you don't have to make better and better versions of them. You just don't make them for a while, and they come back and they're fresh and new.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of this tenets about Magic the Gathering that people uphold are almost exclusive to the Modern format. I think that is actually what people think of when they think of like competitive Magic in general is typically not Standard. It's typically Modern. It's that's where all the archetypes are really fleshed out, and they're not necessarily like quote unquote handed to you. The mutate mechanic from Ikoria was like specifically positioned around weird or bad creature removal, right? Because that mechanic is so dependent on the creatures being there. You're stacking all your creatures onto one. So anytime there's a format where enchanting a creature or mutating a creature or whatever they want to push, it's very important that they recognize the environment that it's around. If you ever want to say, Magic the Gathering takes a vested interest in what their formats look like, and bans come from when stuff goes way out of whack or enough people complain and they just don't like it. They're not having any fun. They don't want to do it. So, I think that having that sort of control over it is not realistic for what we're dealing with right now. But I think having the parameters in place to safeguard you, because Siege Rhino never got banned. Siege Rhino lived until rotation, and thank God it rotated. Like, if there was no rotation in it, you'd have to cry for a ban constantly. And, people still did, don't get me wrong, but,
Is Back Alley Haymaker...
Wait, say that one more time, you cut out.
Is Back Alley Haymaker our Siege Rhino?
I don't know, because...
It's like middle of the road costed. It's just a ton of super efficient but just boring value. You can absolutely drown someone with a pile of Back Alley Haymakers. Instead we could drown them with Siege Rhinos, but it's like an aggro card, but it's not really an aggro card.
It's and it's interesting because the way that I try to parallel things, I try to actually get what are they most similar in the card game itself. And so for that, I think of attacks more like burn spells, and I think of foundations as hate bears, more equivocally, right? And so to me, rescue completed is way closer to a Siege Rhino. Having rescue completed and the Momo refund, or just Momo's ability, having a good rescue completed setup, even just Asui. Asui can still do that, by the way, guys. Asui can just give your attack -2 speed and flip the ready yourself.
Asui not playing rescue completed is still wild to me.
Yeah, she can
so
still
good.
just flip back to blocking everything because she held 5 cards. So, So when I think of that, I think of like Siege Rhino hits the board, it gives you a life swing so that you can't afford to make bad trades, and it also kind of stands as a pillar on the board to cancel itself out. And in that respect, Rescue Completed seems the most akin to it as a permanent board stay that slows the game, that stagnates it to a specific conclusion based on other cards. Because Siege Rhino was never doing it all by itself. It did, however, trample over everything smaller than it, which Rescue Completed kind of helps you trample over decks that lack defense. That's a bad take, but this is the last part is, but as far as like a permanent board stay that changes what makes it worthwhile to attack and what you can trade into and out of, I think it's Rescue Completed. But again, there's nothing even close. If I had to pick a non-foundation that'd be close, it'd be something like an Evil Gaze, where it's like an opposite life swing, but you get the tempo that was afforded to you by the Siege Rhino to turn around into a win. Because Siege Rhino is nowhere near as impressive if it doesn't have trample, right? Like if it doesn't trample over 1/1s, you just chump block it out and like
if it only had 4 top fists instead of 5, so many little things,
So that's kind of my take, because the biggest thing to me about Siege Rhino, because that's when I started playing UFS, was Siege Rhino, 2014, 2015, right? Like right in there. And I remember talking to Brett Hillman at Locals when I was like, I had just dabbled through like I had just paid attention through the internet on stuff like Caw Go and like the Jace the Mind Sculptor interview on the fucking Jungle Cruise where I think it was Chapin, or it's probably not Chapin, but the guy who was like, at some point, you're going to be playing other Jaces to kill their Jace the Mind Sculptor with the legend rule. You know, that's like the iconic quote where people did eventually end up playing like other shittier Jaces just to, kill Jace off the board. And so when I think of like stuff that's warping in Magic, I think of it where Siege Rhino blocks Siege Rhino, so you have to play Siege Rhino. I think of it as like stuff that specifically counters itself and stalemates itself.
That's true.
I do want to
get... All right, it's getting pretty late. Yeah, you got one more thing?
Yeah, I want to get your opinion on just one more absolute thing, and then we can go through all the plugs and all that stuff. When it comes to the future sets, the set 3 reveals, what are you most excited for from all the cards that have been revealed for set 3? Starter decks, characters, anything.
Oh, they've been revealed so far?
Has anything stuck out to you? You can pull it up on Discord if you need to on the reveals.
It's Ojiro, right? It's the 3 zones guy?
Yes, Ojiro is the one that gets +1/+1 for each unique zone that you have. And then I believe he gets to pick a card up from his card pool.
If you have all 3 zones, you get to just draw any attack from your card pool.
I think a lot of people
are card at all.
Yeah.
He's real sweet. I sure love my zone mix-ups. So
I know Andrew Holder is super excited for his foundation. I am pretty sure we got spoiled that he's gonna have like the combo attack or whatever it was. There's like some bigger combo kind of a thing, so I'm excited to see that. And that was the first character that was interesting to me. He was revealed pretty early, but that was the first one I looked at and went, I can make an entire deck of just lows and give them all +1/+1, and people will certainly hold a block of each zone, right?
I'm also real hype about Hero Clash, the SR. They reviewed the Gen Con.
The No Mighty train.
Some truly worthy 1-checks, yes.
I'm afraid of that card, man. I'm afraid I'm going to end up playing Denki 1 and just try to bank 3 momentum and just play 3 of those, just clear the card. Because you can play it by itself just to draw 2 cards. It's so open-ended. Yeah, at first I thought...
Shadow can play that card? Busted.
At first I thought it's not as good because you don't get to draw your whole card pool, but because you can play it by itself and still draw 1 card, I think it actually makes it a little better.
It's real sideways. Like the no progressive was the best part of No Buy.
Yes, that's true. And that's part of why I'm like, well, now I don't have to go so deep and like, play 5 later type of thing. But
you played 4 with a much straighter pace too.
Yeah. I used to love building out my whole hand, like play 3 attacks and then play like a 1s and 0 diffs and then play Nomai with 8 cards and draw a whole new hand type of a thing. That was always sick. I definitely won a game at the Napalm Man Nats in Atlanta because my opponent blocked a Flash Lightning, and then I built out my hand and played a Nomai on turn 2, and all he had to do was not give me momentum.
Flash Lightning, what a card.
Yeah, I think I had 3 Flash Lightning and a Nomai, and I was like, I'm Pharaoh Man. If I put 2 damage on all of these, he's gonna block 1. He's gonna block one of them. And sure enough, he blocked the 3rd one because he was like, well, I don't know what else you got, but it can't be much.
And that Flash Lightning stacks with Nomai to make it super easy. Make
it 2 difficulty, and I'm pretty sure I checked the 2 to play it.
Easy game.
Yep. Or no, it would have been 3 difficulty, but I'm still pretty sure I checked the 2 to play it. But yeah, it was a super cool card. I am super excited for that one. Broberg, you have any sponsors? Anyone you want to shout out before we take it away here?
Yeah, shout out to Rochester CCG and the Rochester CCG Provisional Championship here in Rochester. At the Main Street Armory. It's a fantastic venue. I'm super pumped to be there. I'm actually judging there, so you can actually come and win real easy.
That actually makes it much more enticing to fly out there if I only have to beat Tim Keefe and Ryan Field and Jesse Cervini.
Also judging T.O.
And who?
Jesse's our T.O. and the other 2 are also judging.
Okay. Really? Okay, all right. Now we actually have a chance, guys. You heard it here first on Orange Card, Blue Card. You actually have a chance to win the Rochester Provisional now. Is Sean playing?
Sean is also going to be TOing or something like that. Or he's going to be running the store there.
He's going to run the shop, yeah. That makes sense. He's going to be running the booth. Any other shout-outs? Anyone else you want to...
Yeah, that's the big one. I think... shout out to the Noco and George and Alex and Luis for running an excellent tournament up in Toronto. Shout out to all my opponents, Jesse Perez especially, because Lomu is freaking cool. Shout out to Sleep. I'm ready for that one.
That's a good one. Stay hydrated, all that good stuff.
Buddy.
Thank you, man. Thank you for joining me. Congratulations once again on winning the license exam in Canada. Congratulations on being the number 1 rated pro hero currently in the standings. You got the most points after that win. You get to now post on Facebook that you're the number 1 player every time you post an opinion. Now you talked about the Rochester event where you're going to be judging. But is there any events that we can expect you at besides that? Are you going to be... You already said you're not playing this weekend, but Pasadena's coming up. We've got other events scheduled. Is there anywhere else you're planning to travel?
I'm traveling to Pasadena next weekend. And I think... And then I'm certainly planning to play in the online regional. Mm-hmm. That comes up in October. Presently, I don't have any other travel plans beyond that, though.
Awesome.
Well, but I'll be, spending way too much time in Discord too, so you can always reach me there.
Of course. We're always in the chat. We're always involved in the community at this point. It's a very active community, very tight-knit, and I want to thank you, the community, for joining us tonight. If you're watching live on Twitch, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much for the viewership. Thank you, Kevin, for joining me. It's always a blast. I had a great time. And just one of the best minds for our game. Always a pleasure to pick your brain and get those nuggets of information. So thank you again for joining me. I will see you guys next week, 6 p.m. Pacific time, for another episode of the Orange Card, Blue Card podcast. Peace out.